Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the City of Bayonne Planning Board for the month of February. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Chairperson Fiamonte.
Here.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Here.
Commissioner Veloz.
Here.
Commissioner Booker.
Here.
Commissioner Locke. Commissioner Quintella. Absent are Commissioners Becker and Mayorano.
Thank you. All rise for the pledge.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is a statement with regard to the Open Public Meetings Act, Sunshine Law. This regular meeting of the City of Bayonne Planning Board has complied with the Open Public Meetings Act, Sunshine Law. Annual notices of the schedule of regular meetings were published in both the Jersey Journal and Star Ledger newspaper. The schedule of regular meetings for calendar year 2025 is filed with the City Clerk's office. A copy of the agenda of tonight's meeting was emailed to the Star Ledger at least 48 hours prior to this meeting and is posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of the municipal building and the City of Bayonne website. Next on the agenda, we have the adoption of minutes. The minutes of the regular meeting held on January 14th, 2025. Commissioners, you've all received a copy. Are there any recommendations for changes? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a vote.
On the vote, Chairperson Fiamonte.
Oh, motion, I apologize. I'll move.
I'll second.
And on the vote, please.
Chairperson Fiamonte.
Abstain.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Yes.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke.
Aye.
Commissioner Quintella.
Okay.
The minutes have been adopted.
Thank you. Do we have any communications?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have P24-024. It's a redevelopment plan for 15 Agnes Street, Block 232, Lot 10. I would ask the commissioners to vote and second in favor of carrying that matter with no further notice on the part of the applicant.
I'll move.
I'll second.
And on the vote?
Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke.
Aye.
Commissioner Quintella. Next is P-25-005. That's a preliminary investigation and non-condemnation redevelopment plan for property located at 18-20 and 22 East 15th Street, Block 253, lots 39 and 40. We need a motion and a second to carry that matter.
I'll move.
Second.
And on the vote?
On the vote, and that would, both matters would be carried to March 11th, 2025.
Noted. Thank you.
And on the vote,
Yes.
Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke.
Aye.
Commissioner Quintella. Next on the agenda is the public hearing of P-24-028, Salvatore Moscato. Site is 299 Avenue C, LLC, Block 266, Lot 26. The applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval to convert the ground floor commercial space into a residential dwelling unit for a total of 3 residential units. Variance relief is being sought for lot area, lot frontage, lot width, parking structure, and usable open space. Joseph Nitti is the attorney for the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Nitti.
My name is Joseph Nitti of Nitti & Nitti. My office is in Roseland. Today I represent the applicant, Salvatore Moscato, in his application regarding 299 Avenue C in Bayonne. As it was stated, he's seeking to convert his commercial space in that.
Nitti, could you get a little closer
Yes.
to the microphone? We're having a little trouble hearing you up here.
How's now? Good? Okay.
Much better. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
His application seeks to convert a commercial space to a residential space, which would be in conformance with the current zoning. Mr. Salvatore Moscato is seated to my left. He will not be testifying today unless the board wants to hear from him. My only witness is Al Sabeda, the architect, and I'd also like to move all of the exhibits that are on this list into evidence at this time.
Okay, we'll accept those into evidence.
Okay, I'd like to call Mr. Sabata at this time.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Sambade.
Good evening. I do. Al Sambade, S-A-M-B-A-D-E.
It's my understanding Mr. Sabata has testified before this board several times. I ask that he be accepted as our expert.
Yes, we will accept Mr. Sambade as an expert witness.
Mr. Sabata, would you tell us the nature of this application, why it should be granted by this board tonight?
So it's an application, and Commissioner, I know you're busy, so I'll try to be brief. It's an application to convert a vacant existing commercial use on this property, which is located on the west side of Avenue C, one lot in from West 12th Street. Simply, we're taking away the commercial use, converting it to residential use. The final setup will be 3 units, which are permitted in the R3 zone. So we're bringing this property into conformance. Over the years, this board has seen a lot of applications like this in Bayonne and other urban centers. It was common to have neighborhood commercial spaces, your neighborhood grocery store, candy store, and so on. We all grew up in it. And there was a need back then because people didn't have cars. And now they have cars, and we go to shopping malls and everything else. So we end up with a lot of old stock buildings that are not used to their greatest potential. So this is what we're doing here, converting that space into a 2-bedroom apartment. Quite simply, there's no site work proposed, there's no addition to the building, there's no expansion of the building itself involved. We have 2 reports, one from Brian Slough, the board's planner, and Brian in his report, as always, goes into depth as to the nature of the variances and the requirements. And he makes a few recommendations, which I won't go into them, but we will comply with them and we'll modify the plans to reflect that. There's also a report from Joe Benkert, who's the building subcode official, the construction official, I'm sorry. And his main comment is that since we have bedrooms that face the rear, that we need to be able to egress those bedrooms and get to a public way, which in this case would be West 12th Street. So we can do that because Mr. Moscato also owns the property next door. So we will create and record an easement that provides for emergency egress from the rear of 299. And that would solve the issue. Of course, all that has to be done before applicant pulls the building permit. So I don't think that's an issue at this point. And so we come down to the variances. Most of the variances are due to existing conditions, lot width, lot area, and so on. As discussed in the board planner's report, there's really nothing that we can do about this. The size is the size that it is. These 25-foot by 100 or 115 10-foot lots are consistent and historically exist in the area. We are changing the use from a non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming use, which is allowed to remain, so the commercial use could remain, and we're converting it into a compliant use in the R3 zone. The other variance is for parking. Again, 25-foot lot, there's nothing we can do to create any off-street parking here. So this variance, I think, under the C2 criteria, would also be justified. So in conclusion, and just strictly from a planning perspective, this application is consistent with the zoning district requirements. It eliminates a pre-existing nonconformity. It's consistent with the development characteristics of the area. We're not overwhelming the area in terms of density or intensity of use. It furthers the purposes of the municipal land use law in many regards, and it preserves the residential character of this neighborhood. We're not significantly changing. We're not changing it in any way. So this proposal does not result in a detriment
to the zone plan. I don't see any significant detriments. The parking variance would be the only detriment. The benefits outweigh that, because this is a space that existed that had a parking need prior to this, if only for the owner of the property, of the business who didn't live in the building. So there's really a net neutral impact on parking, in my opinion. So with all that, I think the variances are justified, and I'll answer any questions that the board or the board's experts may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sambade. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Sambade regarding his testimony? Okay, seeing none, I'll move down the end. Mr. Slaw?
I'll just say that I will concur with Mr. Sambade's testimony about this property and its analysis of the variance requirements. So I concur that the property could be considered by this board for the variances and allow for the conversion, which would bring it into conformance with the zoning requirements.
Okay,
There is a de minimis variance related to the amount of lot area for the number of units that I don't think is consequential in the context of this particular application or the neighborhood at large.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Russo? Okay, thank you. Anything down the end, Ms. Mack or Mr. Reichel? Okay, thank you. At this time, I would open it up to any members of the public that have any questions of Mr. Sambade's testimony. Is there anyone in the audience? Okay, thank you, Mr. Sambade. Mr. Nitty, actually, first, let me see if there are any members of the audience that wish to make a comment. Are there any members that wish to make a comment, whether it be pro or con? Seeing none, Mr. Nitty, if you have any closing statements that you wish to put on the record?
We have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any comments? Okay, seeing no comments. At this time, I would make a motion to approve this application. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And on the vote, please?
Commissioner Quintella. Aye. Commissioner Locke.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Aye.
Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Application's been approved.
Okay, thank you. Best of luck.
Next on the agenda is public hearing P-24-010, 398 Broadway. The site is 398 Broadway LLC, Block 226, Lot 44. Applicant is seeking preliminary and final site plan approval for an extension of the ground floor rear and second floor to the rear of the building to include additional space for a dance studio, as well as additional room for a residential portion of the building with variance relief for lot area, lot frontage, rear yard setback, lot coverage, open space, habitable floor area, and number of off-street parking spaces.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Andrew Tadros on behalf of the applicant, 398 Broadway LLC.
Good evening, Mr. Tadros.
Good evening. We will be calling one witness today, Mr. Stephen Kowalik. The owner is here as well, Mr. Louis Ochoa, if the board has any questions for him. This application stems from a dream that Mr. Ochoa had 15 years ago. He initially started the dance studio for his son, who is autistic, and the idea was it would be for the community, and that after a certain period of time, it was rented out for financial reasons to Latin Groove. As some of you are aware, Latin Groove has moved, and he wants to bring the studio back with an expansion on the first floor to benefit the community. The cost would be very low, to just basically to cover the overhead of the dance teachers, and he would be living on the second floor. So the expansion would be for the first and the second floor where he would be occupying it. At this time, I'd ask to move exhibits A1 to A21 into evidence.
Okay. We'll accept those into evidence.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'll be calling my first witness, Mr. Stephen Kowalik.
Sure. And Mr. Kowalik has appeared before us numerous times. We accept him as an expert witness.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Sorry.
I do.
Mr. Kowalik, for the benefit of the board, can you go over the report dated January 2nd, 2025?
Sure. I'm actually going to just read through some of my notes, which I think will cover everything in the report, and then also just give a general overview of the application itself.
Thank you.
So the subject property is a two-story mixed-use building at 398 Broadway. It's situated on a 2,516-square-foot lot between East 18th and 19th Streets in the CBD zone. The first floor, as you heard, was occupied for a long time by a dance studio operated by the applicant and also by others. And the second floor contains currently two dwelling units, a 596-square-foot two-bedroom unit facing the front, and a 507-square-foot one-bedroom unit facing the rear. The applicant seeks to construct a two-story rear addition with the aim of creating about 450 square feet of additional dance studio space at the first floor and enlarging the rear dwelling unit to a three-bedroom, two-bath apartment, approximately 1,140 square feet in area for his own use. No changes are proposed to the front dwelling unit or to the front portion of the existing dance studio. So the applicant's here seeking site plan approval and variance relief. While the submitted drawings do not indicate any proposed change to the building's front facade, the applicant does plan to replace the existing aluminum siding at the second floor elevation with new siding. The existing ground-level storefront glazing is in good condition. No new signage is proposed, but any future change in sign would be subject to permitting through the zoning office. No on- or off-track site improvements are proposed. However, the applicant does not object to planting a new street tree as recommended by the engineering report. No other landscaping is proposed. No new exterior lighting is proposed at the front of the building. No new utilities are required. No new mechanical equipment is proposed to be installed. The existing utility connections are all sufficient in size. The existing sidewalk is in good repair and appears to meet relevant ADA requirements. The proposed addition is located fully at the rear of the building. It will not be visible from the street. The rear yard is landlocked. It's fully bounded on all three sides by neighboring structures. And the proposed addition calls for a 10-foot rear setback at the first floor, stepping back to 20 feet at the second floor in order to create a roof deck for that expanded rear dwelling unit. The adjacent structures to the north and south both extend all the way to the rear lot line, with the neighbor to the south having a 5 or 6 foot step back at the second floor. There's an existing egress passageway on the south side of the first floor accessible to all occupants, which provides access to the rear yard where trash and recycling will continue to be kept. The proposal conforms with relevant bulk criteria as to front and side yard setbacks, structure height, and floor area ratio. And the site's characterized by existing nonconformities with respect to lot area, lot frontage, and lot coverage. These conditions are not proposed to change, and the applicant requests that they be included with any variance relief that may be granted tonight. Variances are requested for bedroom count, rear yard setback, and parking. With respect to bedroom count, since the CBD zone only allows for 1 and 2 bedroom units, the proposed 3-bedroom unit would be one of relatively few in the zone, allowing for a small degree of housing choice. The proposed 10-foot rear yard setback would exceed those on the majority of the block, where only 4 out of 13 properties currently have any rear yard. While an argument could be made that a 0 lot line rear setback would be in keeping with the surrounding context, the proposed 10-foot rear yard is intended to allow for space not only for use by the building's occupants, but also to limit impact on the building to the east, which has multiple west-facing windows. The fact that the reduced rear setback is limited only to the first floor also serves to mitigate the impact of this deviation. The building to the south has a north-facing window at the second floor, which will be covered by the proposed addition. This condition would exist irrespective of the need for a rear yard variance. The building code does not permit windows on or within 3 feet of the side lot line, so the existing window is technically a code violation. And our investigation of the neighboring structure reveals that it's not required for emergency egress purposes, since the room that it serves has a rear-facing window as well. So closing it up would not pose any issues in terms of the code. No parking exists on the site. Like most interior lots on Broadway, it's not possible to meet any parking requirement. But despite creating 2 additional bedrooms, the proposal is actually parking neutral. So the existing residential parking requirement is 2.25 cars, and the proposed requirement is 2.75, both of which we would round up to 3. The first floor commercial space does not require parking. It's below 2,000 square feet. So the proposal doesn't trigger a need for additional parking, and it's also a roughly 6-minute walk from the 22nd Street Light Rail Station. So I do believe there's sufficient cause to grant the relief being sought tonight. The project satisfies the positive criteria by advancing several stated purposes of zoning. Namely, it encourages municipal action to guide appropriate development, it promotes a desirable visual environment, and it provides for a variety of uses, including commercial. As for the negative criteria, I believe an approval can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, nor would an approval substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan, the zoning ordinance, or the master plan. That about covers it.
Thank you. Mr. Tadros, do you have any questions for
No,
Mr.
I do
Qualic
not.
before we move on?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Kowalik?
Yes, I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
Ma- The extension is going to cover the back and the second floor, correct? That's what you said.
So correct, there's a partial existing 1-story extension now, which we're widening and also extending to the rear. We're leaving an areaway at the side for access to the rear yard behind that. So the second floor will go the full width of the lot. So there'll actually be an overhang above a sort of areaway at the ground floor, and the second floor won't go as far back as the first floor. There's going to be a 10-foot step back.
Meaning the second floor, how many bedrooms do you have actually right now? 2?
Right now, there's a 2-bedroom and a 1-bedroom, and it's going to become a 2 and a 3.
2 and 3.
Correct.
Okay. On the first floor, on the extension, do they keep the dance studio? Because I believe they moved to 440 on Broadway, the Latin Grove.
My
They're going to
understanding,
continue as a dance studio?
Yes, so Latin Groove moved, but Mr. Ochoa is a dance instructor. So the idea is he's going to have another dance studio there, but it's going to be more for the community, and the expansion is more to showcase, like have shows kind of thing for the community where they can participate.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners have questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Slaw, any questions, comments?
I would just comment, I think Mr. Qualic has indicated in his testimony reasons why the grant of the variances could be made. We had asked if there was any means whereby some of the impervious coverage in the rear yard could be removed, if there was a plant or anything of that nature that might be possible to be put there so that it's not entirely impervious. So I don't think I heard anything on that question.
it would be possible to eliminate some of the concrete and add a certain amount of pervious area. Wouldn't object to that.
If that could be done, it would help foster some of the city's goals to green areas that have presently 100% impervious area. And my point about the city engineer determining whether a tree is feasible at the front actually has to do with the utilities, because you obviously can't plant a tree on top of the sewer lateral or the water supply line, and we don't know where those are at this point. So that would be the only other comment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Russo?
Just one comment. Steve, I don't know if you mentioned it, but are you planning on any new mechanical equipment? I might have missed that one.
No, currently we're not, because really he's just expanding the existing apartment, so that would be served by the same mechanical equipment. If anything, it might be an upgrade to the boiler or something, but it's all going to be internal.
Okay, and as far as that window to the building to the south is, I'm assuming you would notify the property owner to close that window? Or
We would have to,
You'd give them proper notice?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything down the end, Ms. Mack, Mr. Reichel? No. Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the audience that have a question for Mr. Kowalik regarding his testimony? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Kowalik.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that wish to make a statement, whether it be pro or con regarding this application? Okay, Mr. Tadros, if you have any closing remarks?
I believe Mr. Kowalek's testimony covered everything. I would ask that you approve this application. I believe that the benefit would substantially outweigh any detriment, and this would be a great addition to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any comments before we move to a vote? Okay, I'll make a motion.
Second.
And on the vote, Commissioner Quintella. Aye. Commissioner Locke.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Velardo.
Aye.
Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye, thank you. And good
Application's
luck.
been approved.
Next on the agenda?
Do we want to take a short break?
Okay, yep, you're welcome. Okay, I do believe we're about to get started.
Madam Chair, would you like me to do a roll call?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Quintella. Here. Commissioner Locke. Here. Commissioner Booker.
Here.
Commissioner Veloz.
Here.
Vice Chair Velardo. Here. Chairperson Fiamonte.
Here.
Before I call the next application, there was one item that needed to be carried to our March 11th meeting without any further notice. It's P-21-014, 62.5-72 Prospect Avenue, Block 449, lots 21, 22, 23. That is an area need study. Can I get a motion and a second to carry that till March 11th, 2025 without any further notice?
I'll
On the-
move.
I'll second.
And on the vote, please?
And on the vote. Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke. Commissioner Quintella. Next on the agenda is item number 8, public hearing P-24003, Shri Lakshmi, I'm going to butcher this one, Vardayini Urban Renewal, LLC. Site is Block 751, lots 1.06, 1.07, 1.08, 1.09, 1.10, 1.12, 1.14, and 1.16. Applicant is seeking an amendment to the GDP for the blocks listed above.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. Stephen Tripp from the firm of Wilentz, Goldman and Spitzer on behalf of the applicant. Just by way of brief introduction, this is a redevelopment within the HS2 district. It's within the Harbor Station South redevelopment plan area. There was an original GDP that was granted back in 2019 that encompassed 27.44 acres and included 4,500 units with retail, hotel, and the buildings were between 5 and 25 stories, which was per the redevelopment plan that was in effect at that time. Since then, a couple of things have happened. One is that the original applicant has split into 2 separate entities, and we're both here this evening seeking to amend the portions of the GDP area that we each control. This Shri Lakshmi Vardayini Urban Renewal LLC has 19.65 acres of the original GDP area, which is about 2/3. And it's the lot and blocks that were just recited. The other thing that occurred was there was a redevelopment plan amendment that allows a height now of 50 stories and 625 feet that permits an increase in residential density and overall density. So what we have and what we're proposing this evening is a general development plan. Again, it's a overall plan, we're not seeking site plan approval at the present time. It's simply amending the GDP for our portion of the GDP area, proposing 11,900 residential units, approximately 500,000 square feet of ground floor retail, and the architect will explain the nature of that. A hotel, over 1,300 off-street parking spaces. And what we're looking for tonight is a amended GDP approval governing the portion of the GDP that is within the control of the Sri Lakshmi and its affiliated companies. Based on the number of units and the overall size of the project, we're seeking a 20-year vesting of the GDP approval per the municipal land use law, which will give us time to develop the site in phases, and you'll hear some testimony as to that as well, so that the units will be absorbed, will be coming in for site plan approvals on a site-by-site basis, dealing with the specific site issues as the project proceeds. A couple of minor things, just some housekeeping. The planner's report noted 2 possible areas of deviation or variances. We're not seeking any. One was height. There was an error on one of the plans that indicated a 650-foot height, which would have required a deviation or a variance. We're not seeking that. As the architect will indicate, the buildings will not exceed the 625 feet permitted by ordinance. And there were also, in the planner's report, a discussion of the tower orientation and building massing, and we will stipulate that the buildings will comply. When we come in with site plans, the buildings will comply with the requirements in the amended redevelopment plan. So we're not seeking any relief at all. This application is fully in conformance with the redevelopment plan as amended. And what I have this evening is we have the architect, the site engineer, traffic engineer, and a professional planner, and we'll be presenting the testimony in that order. The other thing is the presentation deck is a series of exhibits which we'd like to have marked as A27, and we'll leave a hard copy with the board administrator at the end of the hearing.
Okay.
But we have it, it will be on the screen.
Okay, we'll accept that.
And with that, I think I'd like to call Michael Higgins, the architect, to start.
Good evening, Mr. Higgins.
Good evening. Yes. Michael Higgins, Higgins.
And Mr. Higgins, can you just give the board a little benefit of your expertise and your professional qualifications?
Sure. I have a professional architecture degree from the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm the managing principal and CEO of MHS Architecture, formerly Marchetto Higgins Stevie, based in Hoboken, where I've been a partner and have been there for 30 years. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, and my license is current and in good standing.
And you've been accepted as an expert witness in hearings?
Yes. I'm not sure, not recently in Bayonne, but in other municipalities throughout New Jersey.
Thank you.
We'll accept Mr. Higgins as an expert witness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You may proceed.
Okay. So we have a presentation deck. Do I change the pages, or do you turn the pages for me? Okay. Thank you. The first slide is an aerial view of the Bayonne Peninsula with the outline of the site in question, the property in question, outlined in red. So this is a little bit of history about the peninsula. It was a man-made peninsula and a military supply station during World War II. I guess in the 1980s or 90s, it was given back to the city of Bayonne, and now it's a area of land that's primed to create really a world-class and very transformational site. So we're transformational neighborhood, and we're very excited to be part of this and presenting it to you tonight. We can go to slide 2, please. This is again an aerial shot, sort of orienting and highlighting where Broadway is in Bayonne, the main street, commercial street, and then also the location of the different buildings along the peninsula. You'll see some of the other items that we'll have there. We included some of the slides to the right are the images, the watercolor images from the original master plan and how that site was envisioned as a pedestrian-friendly, nice community waterfront development. This next slide is a plan view depicting the organizations of the buildings as they sit on each block. So we've extended 2 streets through the site to create city type of block structure, Street A and Street B. The organizations of the new blocks surround a linear green open space, as you see that runs sort of diagonally through the site. That happens to be the location of an underground utility structure, a combined sewer main that goes through there, and so that was a nice opportunity to sort of organize the buildings around an open space. The new buildings are offset on each block to allow for light, air, and views. They have varying heights to provide a architectural visual interesting composition. The maximum height is 625 for building heights. There's 11,900 residential units, and the buildings range from 6 to 50 stories. The residential FAR is 11.24, not including the hotel. The density per acre is 606 units per acre for the residential, and the FAR for the commercial portion of the building is 0.58. Parking will be provided within the GDP plan area and will comply with all the redevelopment plan requirements. There's also a 500-key hotel that's planned and approximately 499,600 square feet of total commercial space. We can probably go to the next slide now.
Well, one question, the lighter gray, that's the area that's outside of our GDP area, correct?
That's correct. There is this project, then we'll get to the staging later, but it's a 14-stage project. Will be done in 14 different phases, or that's what's anticipated currently. And it's anticipated that it would take over a period of about 20 years to build out the entire thing. All construction activities and staging will be in the GDP plan area. This slide, number 4, is a plan depicting all the ground floor retail located on each block. So we have a total of 166,362 square feet of ground floor retail to support the new residents. The type of retail we're envisioning for these spaces is food and beverage, convenience shops that could vary in size from 500 to maybe 5,000 square feet, although larger spaces could be accommodated if the market dictates that. There is enough square footage to accommodate a school inside this development, in the ground floor and the second floor of some of the buildings on the different blocks, and that would be something that would be pursued at a later date, but there is enough square footage currently to allow for that.
We were asked by both professionals to indicate whether there was adequate space, and there's adequate space.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. I think we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is an open space plan that indicates the areas of open space. So this plan meets or exceeds the 15% requirement. It includes 2/3 of the lot area of lot 1.14, which is in the middle left side of the page.
That's a city-owned property that's going to be developed as a park in conjunction with the general development.
That's correct. That's correct.
And we're including 2/3 of it because there's also responsibility with the other developer, correct?
That's correct.
And based on our proportional ownership, we're taking considering two-thirds of that to be open space within our development.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. There is a pedestrian plaza that's the lower portion of the plan that's linear. It's lined by retail. Each building, the pedestrian plaza will be built in the first and second phases of the project. The Central Park area, that linear diagonal park, starts in phase number 7, but throughout the construction, each of the buildings will have elevated landscape roof decks for the residents, so there will be open space provided in addition to what's being provided at grade. In terms of the maintenance of the grade, certainly the open space on the buildings will be maintained by the building, but at grade, the owner will coordinate with the city regarding the maintenance of any open space. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, these are the phasing plans that show the
Before you
14-phase
move on,
breakdown. Yeah.
Just, can you give us an example of some of the types of things that might be included within the open space?
Yep, the open space, and I have a slide later that we can look at, but there'll be some potential for small water fountain parks. There'll be places for green areas where people can lay out and sunbathe, and quiet places. There'll be paved areas with formal landscaping and walking paths. And then there'll also just be the pedestrian plaza, which is more like a commercial street that would be lined with cafes and outdoor seating and those sorts of things.
Certainly. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the phasing, this phasing plan will show, this is the first page of, I guess, 3 pages of phasing plans, which was included in the submission. It shows how way it's contemplated, how the phasing could happen. It's a very large project, so there is a chance that things could happen in a different way, but we just wanted to demonstrate a proof of concept of how this could happen, and that there would be adequate parking. This plan, this exhibit, shows that surface lots will be used during the construction. All the construction activities and also the staging will happen within the GDP plan.
And during this plan, there'll be structured parking built as part of the units, but there'll also be some surface parking as it's developed. Obviously, the buildings will be built, but while there's areas, there could be surface parking during some phases. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can just page through the next few phasing plans. You could see as it evolves, the building and the center park, the linear park, will come together, and it'll become what we think will be a very nice community. This is the last 2 phases of the plan, phase 13 and 14, and then there's a table with some additional numbers. We included some typical unit layouts that show a studio, a 1-bedroom, and a 2-bedroom unit, just for informational purposes. Those are the type of units that we would provide. These are what is typically considered market rate type of units that would probably work very well here. This last slide of the architectural presentation shows a vision of what the space could look like with some of the buildings, and what a linear reflecting pool along that park, and some of the water fountain activities that could happen, some of the places around the surrounding area that are very successful, different types of plazas, and they're just here to give you a sense of the flavor of the space that we feel like it could be, this place. I believe that concludes my testimony.
Okay.
Right.
If you have no questions for your expert witness, I'll move to the commissioners. Any commissioners have questions? Okay, then I'll move down to Mr. Slough first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
Higgins. I had a couple of questions, if you might. Had you a chance to determine the percentage of open space that
Yes.
in the plan that you have just presented?
Yes, it was, I believe it's still 17.6. Let me just go to that page. I think that's on Yeah, I believe it's 17.6 still. And then we also calculated the total open roof space at 282,634 square feet, or 33% of the total site area. So that's the elevated open space, but at grade, we're going to exceed the 15%. But right now, the calculation is approximately 17.6%.
So consistent with the GDP application, but more refined now that you've had a chance to look at it. Would that
Yes.
be an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of some of the deeper retail spaces, you had indicated various convenience retail and food and beverage. There are some deeper retail spaces in depth. Are you thinking that there would be, say, retail clothing stores and things of that nature?
I would
in
say
the
that
space?
that would probably be likely, those kind of things. I mean, it's a little bit of an organic process to see what realtors or retail operations want to come into the area, but there's all sorts of stuff. There'll be some uses, we think, for back-of-house space for some of the retail uses, so those would take the deeper spaces likely.
Mm-hmm. The ones that need, have greater storage needs, in other words.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reichel? Ms. Mack?
Mine are really to the board. I just wanted to comment. First, Mr. Higgins' firm is excellent. We've worked with them many times. I just wanted to put for the record that the MOPB was in existence and operating as a military base from 1967 to 1999. In 1996, as some of you know, the Base Reuse Commission met and actually decommissioned it in 1999, and then it was conveyed to the city of Bayonne in the year 2000. So from that, you wouldn't be aware of those points, but I know you're going to be working on the project for a very long time, so I just wanted to give you that. In 1991, it was the head operations for Desert Storm, so I didn't want to give the impression that we had closed it while it was still an operating military base.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mack.
Just a few things. The first one, with respect to the phasing plan, just to acknowledge, at least in my letter, I've requested that at each site plan, if the phasing, I know it's presented as proof of concept, but there is a phasing plan presented, and we'd like to see that updated at each site plan application. As a matter of resolution compliance, we'd like to see durations and some proof that the 20 years that you're requesting that the project can be implemented within that time frame. It's my understanding that the applicant intends to revise the phasing plan to expedite the open space for lot 1.14. Is that something that we can put on the record?
Yes, we talked about that. Mr. Higgins, can you address that?
Yep, we did. We looked at the pedestrian plaza being built as part of the first couple phases. The landscape roof decks and the open space in the buildings will also be built on a building-by-building case. Build in Phase 7, which is right in the middle of this phase. I think 4,000 some odd units would be built at that time. The park, that Central Park, starts to get built. And again, at each phase, when a project comes in, each building would have a site plan, a full site plan application, and we would be in compliance with the redevelopment plan and submitting in greater detail this complex project.
So are you saying you're going to expedite I didn't hear that you're going to move up the open space in the phasing plan.
Well, I know the pedestrian plaza will be, and the green open space is, it's sort of, we'd have to revise the phasing plan, I think, because
What you were saying is
Yeah.
the park would be moved up to Phase 7.
Phase 7 was where we moved it up to right now.
Yeah. How many years would that be?
It's a good question. It could be, well, it depends on market conditions. It's hard to say, really, but it's about halfway through the process, and if it's a 20-year process, it could be in that 8 to 10-year type of range.
So that doesn't sound expedited, correct, Mr. Reichel?
It's expedited from, it's currently
20.
proposed as the last phase.
Okay,
So it's, I'll leave that to the board to
interpret.
interpret.
Thank you.
And then I guess the last thing I'll have for this particular expert is there's a number of things in my report that we didn't talk about. I just presumed that we're okay with them as they relate to this witness.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
But I think Eric Ballou will be testifying on the engineering comments as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that have questions for Mr. Higgins? Okay, seeing none, I believe we can move on to our next witness.
I do. Eric Ballou, E-R-I-C-B-A-L-L-O-U. A little bit of my credentials. I've done this for approximately 29 years with a focus on redevelopment projects. Most notably, I'm the engineer of record for the Waterview project that's at this location, the Aquaview, as well as the previous GDP for Bayonne experience.
Mr. Ballou, are you telling us you've testified before this board before?
I am.
I thought you looked from, your name sounded familiar. We will accept you as an
And
expert
and you have a
witness.
current,
Welcome.
your engineering license is current? and-
My professional license is in good standing also, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. You
Thank
may
you.
proceed.
So if we could, so I think it was in the same presentation that was up for the architect, I believe I've uploaded my GDP engineering plans. I think we're at the end of this presentation. Let's see. Yeah, maybe 3 more. All right, so that's a title sheet, so we'll go past that one. Maybe next slide. I'm looking for a C200 circulation plan. That's it. All right, excellent. So the plan that's on the screen right now is C200. So this is the submitted circulation plan that's part of the requirements for a GDP application. As part of the project, we have Chosen Few Way that's completed along our western side. We also have Flagship Street along the eastern portion of the site, already existing streets. And then along the southern portion, we have Goldsboro Drive as well. To the north, we have what really consists as an existing paper street, East 40th Avenue Street, but that's going to be completed as part of a prior board approval. So we're going to have 4 completed streets along for the entire development area. And then as discussed before, we've also have Street A, which connects Goldsboro to that East 40th Street. And we have Street B that also connects from Goldsboro to East 40th Street. And then to supplement that, we've also have West Constitution Avenue, which is a dividing street that connects Flagship to Street B. So we've added multiple streets within this area. We designed the widths and the parking and the lanes to accommodate the redevelopment plan to give multiple options for traffic distribution. As part of this, besides the vehicles, we also have a minimum of 10-foot wide pedestrian walkways per the redevelopment plan. So our circulation is providing opportunities for the vehicles, emergency vehicles, as well as the more important, a lot of times, the pedestrians as well. There were 2 comments within the review letters that I want to address in regards to the circulation plan. First was West Constitution Avenue. Right now we have this uniform block arrangement for the blocks to the north and to the south. So we have a street directly in the middle of that, making uniform lot and blocks. But when the previous subdivision map was created, that street was envisioned as an angular street that was cutting through. So right now, we're going to clean up adjust those lot lines to allow the uniform roadway, or we can even have as an option as well is to realign the roadway to match the lot lines. I think our goal is to adjust lot lines to accommodate this street, West Constitution Avenue. And that was within the planner's letter for us to discuss this and address. The other aspect is that we have right now at Street B that connects from East 40th all to Goldsboro. And right now in the GDP plans, we show that roadway section being the standard section associated with the redevelopment plan guidelines. But that is based upon our anticipation of a roadway dedication from the adjacent lot 1.04. So it was always anticipated that there would be a portion of that property dedicated to Bayonne to allow this uniform roadway to connect up between Goldsboro and East 40th Street. I will say, though, if in some unforeseen situation, if that right-of-way dedication did not occur, we have sufficient room within our property development in Lot 1.16 that we would accommodate a two-lane roadway. It would just be shifted further to the west. So if the right-of-way dedication occurs, which we hope does occur, the plans will be exactly as shown. If not, we would do a slight adjustment to a portion of that roadway to accommodate two-lane traffic in that area. If we could advance to the next sheet. Okay, so this is sheet C300, the utility plan. First is sanitary sewer, which were set up very well. Right now, there's an existing gravity sewer main that sort of cuts through the project that you can see through this area here through an existing 20-foot easement. So what it is, it's a gravity sewer line that then goes to an existing pump station on lot 1.13. So having a sanitary sewer that bifurcates our site allows easy sanitary sewer connections for our roadways to tie into that main that's also then connected to the pump station. So we have the ability to connect based upon the infrastructure that's been put in place many years ago. From a water perspective, we have water mains on Chosen Few, Goldsboro, Flagship. So we have multiple water mains that exist as well. And that's going to allow us to construct water mains within our existing streets, connecting up to the existing mains, so we'll have numerous looped water systems to provide consistent water service for the project. And then, based on our experience of the development, there is gas, electric, CATV, cable, telephone. So we have existing utilities already within the existing streets. Those would be extended when we build the new streets, as we sort of done with previous development phases here.
Now, in terms of each site plan, at each site plan phase, we would come in and deal with the specific connections, the existing capacity, and those site-specific issues, correct?
Correct. So as part of a typical site plan process, we always submit for will serve letters to all the different utility companies. And we get their feedback to ensure that the demands that we have on the project, each phase of development, can be accommodated. And then if there's some reasons where accommodations can't be made with existing infrastructure, discussions would occur if there's any kind of upgrades or changes or modifications that are necessary. All right, if we advance to the next slide. Okay. So this is another thing that needs to be looked at is stormwater management. How do we address stormwater from our site? And again, this project is really a benefactor of the massive amount of infrastructure that's actually been constructed on this property already, which includes major trunk line storm sewer along Goldsboro that already has 2 existing outfalls into the bay, as well as water quality treatment devices. So the coverage that we have for this project was already anticipated when that massive infrastructure improvement project was done already. So we're able to then utilize that to extend our storm sewer piping from the starting point on Goldsboro and extend that throughout the development to service the site. A large portion of the site is within a 100-year flood zone. As we've done in other projects, we would elevate any of these new roadways that are being constructed and the buildings themselves. We would elevate them to be 1 foot above the preliminary FEMA flood map elevation. I think now it's 13. Interestingly enough, when a lot of the infrastructure was done previously, it used to be like 10. So it's definitely increased since the infrastructure was done. So that's how we'll handle stormwater management. Great part about this property is that we don't have combined sewers right here. We have separate sanitary and separate storm sewer. So it's been set up very well to accommodate this general development plan. From an engineering perspective, that's all I had. Anything else, Steve, that?
I think one of the questions had to do with the flood zone.
Yes, so we are within a flood zone, and we'll elevate the roadways and buildings to be 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevations, based upon the latest FEMA mapping.
I don't have anything specific. We're prepared to address any of the questions or any of the items in the reports. Sure.
In terms of, I think you mentioned like sewer capacity, what are you guys doing for that?
For sanitary sewer capacity? So what we'll do is, for each site plan that's being done, we'll have a sewer demand associated with it. So then we'll submit for will serve letters to Bayonne to get confirmation that there's adequate capacity to service that particular site plan at the time of application.
Is that like the same thing as our impact study?
No, it would be, will serve letters are usually confirmation that there's capacity to service the project. And then further in regards to the sanitary sewer, we also have to get, they call it treatment works permits with the state of New Jersey. And those also require Bayonne signatures to allow us to obtain state permits related to sanitary sewer for each individual site plan phase. If you think of one, just let me know.
Thank you for that. Any other commissioners? Okay. I'll start down here.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So just following up on that, will you be providing the kind of basic demand for sanitary sewer and water supply for this project to indicate kind of the basic expectations for the amount of development that you're proposing?
Yes, we would add, we would agree to add, per the review letter, we would agree to add sanitary flows and water demands associated with this general development plan to our document.
And that would be submitted as a condition of any action taken by the board.
Yeah, so it'd be a compliance condition.
Correct.
So that would get to Mr. Lack's question as well, I think. So one of the questions is, you had indicate prior approval for construction of East 40th Street. How does that actually work with the timing of the phasing that you're proposing?
So I'm not aware of the timing of that construction. I know that it's required per a previous board approval, not of this applicant, but of the adjacent applicant. I'm not sure if there's any statutory timeframes associated with that.
Is there some aspect of your development that's dependent upon that street being finished at a particular time?
So we have multiple routes right now. So I do believe I'd have to go through the exact phases. I do believe some phasing could be done without that connection, but there is going to become a point that that connection would be required.
When would you be able to determine when that street will be needed for your development?
So I believe we talked about adjustments to the phasing plans to add durations and things of that nature. So through the phasing documents, I think we could incorporate when East 40th Street or portions of would be required. We could adjust that through the phasing documents.
And would you accept that as a condition of a compliance approval as well?
Yes, to add the East 40th Street as part of the phasing, yes.
In your design of the circulation plan, had you given any consideration to bicycle use? You had mentioned pedestrian and vehicular circulation.
So we designed the roadways in accordance with the redevelopment plan requirements for roadway widths. I don't believe in the redevelopment plan they've specified any additional widths for bike paths and things of that nature. So we went with the redevelopment plan requirements. So we did not incorporate anything above that in regards to bike paths.
Understood. Is there any thought at this time, because of one of the things the redevelopment plan does discuss is the use of the riverfront walkway as the main kind of pedestrian, like an esplanade almost. And is there means planned within your GDP for connections to that, utilizing adjacent properties? How would connections for that be made by pedestrians, for example, in your plan?
Right, so we've addressed all the pedestrian circulation along all of the streets that we front upon. I don't think we've studied any walkway improvements beyond our frontage at this time.
So would that be something that would be studied with a site plan application, or would that be looked at this stage?
It's something we can study to see.
Yeah.
You know what, could potentially even be, honestly, I haven't studied it, so potentially there's even some linkage that exists already. So we could obviously take a look at that.
Yeah, bicycle use seems to be becoming of growing importance, particularly with the use of electric bikes. Seems to have expanded I feel like the population that uses bikes. Just strikes me as something that the redevelopment plan really didn't think about back in the day, and that's kind of carried on. But with increased emphasis on these, it might be prudent to think about such things for this substantial development for the 21st century. Yes?
Understood.
Okay.
And certainly, that's something we can look into.
Okay. And then the last question I had was, with the increase in elevation, utilizing the preliminary elevations from FEMA, and the need to elevate the streets maybe another 3 feet more than contemplated, does that affect the grades of the intersections where streets A and B will intersect Goldsboro?
Right, so we would elevate all the proposed construction, we would elevate, but then we would tie into the existing streets as they remain today.
Do you anticipate there being any abrupt grade changes then at the intersections that would create concerns about slope at where they tie into Goldsboro?
No, because we have certain percentages, like we can't go above, let's say, 5% because of site view distance and things of that nature. So we would follow proper ASHTO roadway design to make sure there was no abrupt changes.
And you don't anticipate that that would create issues with having the development out of the floodplain at that point?
Correct. We definitely have the ability, when you look at the length of these roadways, so correct, there will be some transitional areas near the existing streets, but we have very long length here to elevate a vast majority of the roadways to be 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation.
So then, would you anticipate that the first floor elevations of the buildings that front on Goldsboro would then be elevated in relationship to the street more than anticipated originally?
Not more than anticipated. The Waterview project right now has that situation now. We sort of have a lower walkway that's at the road grade, and then there's this upper walkway along the plaza, and that was really because we needed to get above 1 foot above the flood elevation. So I think that treatment that is out there today of Waterview, that would be the same type of treatment that would be necessary along Goldsboro.
Mm-hmm. So Waterview might be a literal statement in the future, is what you're telling us.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I had.
Sorry. Mr. Reichel? Oh. Go ahead, man.
So, sorry, I don't know if you already mentioned this, but some of the stuff wasn't like super clear to me. So, let's just say you come to find out there needs to be some infrastructure improvement regarding stormwater drainage, pipe side connections, and water supply relative to we have the capacity to support everything. Who do you like? What's the plan of funding that infrastructure?
I'll plan of funding if there was upgrades. I would defer to you if upgrades were needed.
Well, certainly upgrades, if there have to be any systemic upgrades, the applicant would have to obviously contribute a pro rata share to the cost of anything like that, which would be required. And that would have to be looked at. As we come in with site plan approvals, that's one of the items that would be looked at in terms of infrastructure. So if there had to be improvements, the applicant would certainly have an obligation to address that, and it would depend on what needed to be done, and there'd be certainly a pro rata share assessed at that time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reichel or Ms. Mack?
I just had a few comments. So, Eric, nice to see you. Eric has been involved in this project almost as long as Mr. Reichel and I have been, so it's always nice to see you. You're a constant face. Actually, Ahmed, our commissioner, had raised a question that triggered something in my mind. When he was speaking about the infrastructure improvements or studies that you would do, you said that you would do them. Many times, I believe, at site plan, we make that a condition of approval, but in this instance, are you saying that you would do the analysis so that the board would have that information?
Right, so I think, so when we do the site plan, so if we're going for a site plan application, I think we would submit for will serve letters to verify that there is capacity to service the project. And then if we got any feedback associated that there could be a capacity concern, then we'd have to have a meeting and discuss what those situations are on a base-by-base basis.
So that would be done prior to going to the planning board so that that could be presented to the planning board?
Correct.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention, the conversation about the extension of 40th Street, and I think you're aware of this. I was going to mention it to you when you were in the building a couple of months ago, but as you all know, I think you all know that when we acquired the property in 2000, the federal government gave us a $3.2 million grant to do all the studies that were required at that time for the base. And one of them was the local roadway connector study, which was published in 2003. I believe you're aware of it. I was just going to suggest, since we're now 25 years into MOTB, and I think with the consideration of this plan tonight, we would be 45 years into MOTB by the time that the project was built out under the GDP, that it might be good to go back to the overall studies to see, because it does discuss the need for the connections to connect into Bayonne, and it does consider the traffic capacity and things like that. And as I believe, I think you mentioned the redevelopment plan, the Harbor Station South redevelopment plan mentions all of these overall permits, the highway access permit and things that were the overall thing to which you're building into. So I think if we can help you as you come back in to do the stuff if you move forward, I think that would be a good way to see, because as Brian is alluding to, a lot has changed, and I will tell you that Resilience New Jersey, which Commissioner Lack sits on, which handles the flooding all over in these areas, which is also MOTB. And as you build sustainability, we have a lot of input from the county and from the state DEP on sustainability issues, and they are considering bikeways and other means of transportation is a very important thing. I think our last update on the redevelopment plan, the real update was 218, the last one, and then there was an amendment for the height just more recently. But I think these are living documents, and we'd like to help you update your plans as you move forward.
Understood.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Mr. Reichel?
Sure, just a couple things. Just some assurance for the board with regard to utility, service, and availability. We have a number of checks. This is not the last time that the applicants will need to come in and ensure that they have enough utility availability. Even if this board were to somehow say, you know what, you don't have enough water to service this site, we approve it anyway, the building department would just shut it down, because they also require that you show that you've got enough water. So you've got like this belt and suspenders approach to utility availability. The reality is there's going to have to be system upgrades to accommodate this level of development. Somebody's going to have to pay for them. The applicant will pay their fair share, and that may be all of it. It may be a portion of it. That's to be decided at the planning board hearing and pursuant to redevelopment agreements. Mr. Ballou, you're not the traffic engineer, so I won't ask you a traffic question about the circulation plan. What I am interested in is the circulation plan, just to confirm that it does accommodate emergency services where the roads have been converted to pedestrian plazas, that they will be available to emergency vehicles.
The pedestrian plazas to be available to emergency access?
Yes. If necessary.
I would say if necessary.
It's likely that it's going to be necessary. That's why I bring it
Okay.
up.
I'd say right now, that wasn't our vision, but if that's what's required,
I'm not sure that it will be. I just want to make sure that if it is, I want to get on the record that if we need access to the back of those buildings for fire, that those open space areas will be designed, or those pedestrian plazas will be designed to accommodate emergency vehicles.
yes, if the city of Bayonne requires access, we will design to accommodate access.
Okay. You mentioned that, I want to be clear on this because this is the issue of the, I'll call it the missing right-of-way adjacent to Lot 1.04. And you've mentioned that if that right-of-way were not acquired, you could accommodate a two-way road there. Are you saying that it's a two-way road within the existing city-owned property, or is it a two-way roadway that moves into the adjoining lot to the west?
It would be a two-lane roadway, but there would be the loss of the on-street parking spaces to accommodate it within the right-of-way that's there today.
Okay, I just wanted to, that was my assumption. I just wanted to clarify that for the record. And then, there are a number of other engineering comments in my letter. You guys didn't talk about, I presume you're okay with those. Things like sanitary storage, things like that you're acknowledging. If
Yes,
you're not
well-
talking about them, I assume you're okay with them.
Yeah, so all the engineering-related items I spoke about, yes.
And there was also a comment about construction 10 feet away from either side of the,
Yes, right. So we talked about the sanitary sewer easement through the property. All buildings will be constructed a minimum of 10 foot away from that sanitary sewer main.
Thank you. That's going to make things easier in the future.
That's a good catch. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that have questions for Mr. Blue regarding his testimony? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Blue. Okay, Mr. Tripp? Your next witness, please.
yes, Gary Dean.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I do. Certainly. Gary Dean, D-E-A-N, principal with Dolan and Dean Consulting Engineers, and we are headquartered in Somerville, New Jersey.
Good evening, Mr. Dean.
Good evening.
How about tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. By way of brief background, I'm a graduate of Lehigh University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering and a former member of the faculty of Lehigh and Lafayette College, having served as an adjunct professor teaching transportation engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey and have been so for longer than I care to admit, but in that capacity, I have represented numerous developers as well as municipalities throughout the state. I've previously appeared in Bayonne, and I believe my most recent appearance was for the American Stone site on 2nd Street for Icon Footwear, but other projects in the community include the Alessi organization at South Cove Commons and 7 Hook Road, IMTT, Link Logistics, which was a warehouse site, and Maya Healthcare, among many others.
We accept you as an expert witness and welcome back.
Thank you, Madam.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Dean, what were can you just briefly tell us what you were asked to do in connection with this application?
Certainly. As this board and others are familiar, typically when dealing with site plan applications, we're all reviewing, I would say, the very granular, the very micro elements of a given proposal, where stripes are and where signs should go and how many parking spaces, things of that nature. as a general development plan, the perspective is a little higher elevation. We are looking at a significant development area, and rather than getting into the very specific details of how wide a particular driveway is, our charge for this particular application was basically to assess, can this development feasibly fit on the property as it is proposed? You've seen the development blocks, and as well as the architecture. My role was to look at, I'll say, the virtual entirety of the roadway network on the peninsula, focusing on chosen few, Goldsboro and 40th Street, looking at the proposed development blocks, and assessing the future traffic impacts. Now, why is that a bit of a challenge for this site? Well, we are looking at not a 1 or 2 year build out. This is up to a 20-year horizon. And in that time, as this board and your professionals have seen, candidly, things change. We've done our best in the traffic study that we submitted, and just by way of identification, it was November 26th of 2024. We've looked at what we know that is occurring on the peninsula today, and we've done that by collecting our own traffic data. I owe indebted gratitude principally to Mr. Reichel for sharing his concerns and perspective, as well as some of the background from other traffic studies. We've consulted with the traffic consultant from Costco as to their future plans, and we've done our best to take as realistic a perspective as we can for the traffic associated with up to 16,000 units, hotel space and commercial space, as you've heard.
And when you talk about 16,000, you're anticipating the other part of the original GDP,
Correct. And so even though the exhibit as depicted shows the development blocks in question as have been designated with a darker tone, there are also 2 other development blocks to the north and to the northwest that are not associated with this applicant, but we'd be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge the potential development on those sites as well. So we've basically done their work for them. So we've looked at the entirety of this development, and we've included other projects that this board has approved but aren't yet fully occupied. So I believe we've done a thorough job providing an inventory of all of the development that we know and putting it into our study. One of the things traffic engineers typically do is we rely on data published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I'm sure you've heard ad nauseum from other consultants that refer to ITE, and they publish data. One of the things IT recommends is that as a traffic professional, we should look at the specific environs as closely as possible in order to assess or project future traffic. We recognize that the peninsula is very unique in terms of not only its location, its access, but also the programming relative to the light rail with nearby stations, as well as the anticipated ferry service. As a result of that, the book doesn't always give us the most accurate picture. A high-rise in Chicago will have very different traffic characteristics than we might find on this particular site. So one of the things we did to establish some background was to look at the KRE Bay 151 site and see how does that actually function? How do people enter and exit the site? What is the traffic volume? Where is it going? And we did that as part of this study, and we did that by collecting traffic counts. We also collected traffic counts at Chosen Few and 40th, and at Chosen Few in Goldsboro, and we had the benefit of prior traffic studies done by other consultants recently to look at some of the other locations. Our traffic report assessed, again, what we know as of today, and in trying to forecast where we might be in the future, we did assess, I'll say, comparable sites in Hudson County, and I'm not going to attempt to compare Bayonne with Jersey City. But there are some unique sites in Jersey City that have access within a close walking distance to both the light rail and ferry service. And we looked at the census data and how residents that live in that census tract, what are their traffic habits? How do they commute? And from that, we determined that more than 20%, but for our study, we assumed 20% of people that live near a ferry service that can walk across the street use the ferry as part of their commuting. So we included that, knowing again, 20 years hence, if this board acts favorably, at that time when we're looking at the full maturity of the site and people become familiar and accustomed to those services, they will use them. They will make a purposeful decision to move and live in Hoboken because of those types of amenity from a traffic perspective. The other element that our study considered, I would say, are certain commitments by the applicants. Commitments to provide services such as a zip car or those types of things where residents don't need to own a car, but they have access to a vehicle should they need it for weekend travel. The applicant would also provide a shuttle service, again, for anyone who wants to travel further into town for uses. They don't need to own a car to live in this community. And we have seen that successfully implemented elsewhere in Hudson County. So I think it's a very reasonable commitment. It is one component that helps to suppress traffic impacts. People don't need to get in a car to go to work anymore. And we've seen that unquestionably over the past 20 years. More recently, we all lived through the pandemic. One of the things we've observed in the traffic community is that with Zoom and Teams and high-speed internet, quite frankly, more people, younger people in particular, work from home. And as a result, many of the newer buildings that are constructed have conference rooms, workspace. People don't need to work in their bedroom. They can go downstairs and have a video conference or have the room for the day, which means they don't need to travel or get in a car. The combination of these elements, many of which don't exist today, will all contribute to help keeping traffic, in my opinion, adequately managed on the peninsula and in this site. Our study did consider the assumption that what we saw from the Bay 151 site would continue, that those characteristics would continue in the future for continued development on the site, with one exception, and that is the addition of the ferry service will cause not only people from this building to avail themselves of the ferry, but what we didn't consider in our study is that all of the other developments on the peninsula that are there, those people may no longer get in a car and drive. They may take the ferry. So there could be a reduction. I don't know how to predict that. I could take a 20% credit. We did not. So our study assumed that what we see in 2024, 2025, as exhibited by Bay 51, will be the standard that continues in the future. It's a fair amount of traffic. I'm not going to disguise that. The number of units that are proposed and the potential for people to get in a car and commute is very important. We were also made aware at the onset of our study that there are some existing, I'll call them constraints, associated with some of the development you already have. As part of our research, again, we consulted with the consultants for Costco. We understand and know that there are proposals and advancements with the State of New Jersey Department of Transportation to address some of those constraints. Can we count on it? Not necessarily, but I think it's in the community's best interest and certainly Costco's to pursue those remedies and invest in improvement to alleviate and address some of those concerns. Our study did specifically make select recommendations that I would say are traditional traffic engineering solutions. Things like traffic signals along chosen few and adding additional turning lanes. You can't keep developing this number of units without infrastructure improvements. While we are not here to debate the specific nature of those, again, remembering my initial comments, we wanted to assess and provide this board with a level of comfort that what is proposed can feasibly be managed, that there are viable engineering solutions, and things like signals may not be the right answer. Things like roundabouts or other techniques are available, all of which are feasible at grade solutions that we are committed to work with your professionals, as well as the other shareholders in the process, neighboring developers, to work toward implementing those solutions, whichever the right ones may be. But our objective was to ensure that this level of development can be sustained on the peninsula and given not only the infrastructure you have, but other improvements. There are a number of, I'll say, other scenarios or improvements, mitigation, so to speak, that we have included in our report. For example, and I don't have an aerial to show you, but we know there is an access road that is still a public right-of-way that is south of Lidl. It is very underutilized. To an extent, if that were, I'll say, reinvigorated in terms of better public awareness, particularly for cruise passengers and people who aren't regular residents, that would go a long way to improving traffic along Goldsboro. We have considered, and again, subject to staff, the use of, I want to get it right, Pulaski Lane, which is to the northeast of the subject property that ultimately intersects with Pulaski Street. That is infrastructure that is available and is an alternate roadway parallel to Chosen Few that could provide traffic relief if needed. Issues as to who owns it and whether there are certain restrictions and whether staff believes that that's a good idea are certainly on the table. Our study didn't assume that. We stuck to Chosen Few and Goldsboro principally, as well as 40th Street. Our study also addressed some of the parking elements. And while Mr. Ballou in the site engineering overview didn't get into the specifics, we are aware that your ordinance prescribes a certain amount of parking for the project. It also prescribes an allowance for what's known as shared parking. Shared parking is a concept that a use that is busy during the day and needs parking doesn't need it at night. Retail, medical office, things of that nature, those commercial components close at 6 o'clock as people are coming home. And that same parking space can be used by two disparate users at different times of the day, hence the term of shared parking. Our study did consider your ordinance in terms of what is required for parking as it's written today for the residential components, the hotel, and the commercial. As we add up all of the parking and then we look at the shared, and in our study we looked at specific times of day. We wanted to see what would happen in the middle of a weekday when the commercial components are busier. And then we wanted to understand what would happen at, say, 6 or 7 o'clock at night as residents are starting to come home. There may be some latent retail or commercial demand and some lodging. We included that in all of our work as well. And those elements included things such as traditional retail and service, fitness, health club, child care, senior care, restaurants, and medical office, all with a certain allocation. Not everything is retail. It's not all one big shopping center. And for each of those times of day, a weekday evening, say 6 to 7, a Saturday, middle of the afternoon, a Saturday, again, dinner time, and then finally overnight hours, as residents would be home, but the businesses would be closed. In each instance, all of our parking calculations noted a surplus of just under 1,000 spaces. So we have roughly 1,400, and I think it's, where'd it go? 1,400 and 500 or so site parking spaces.
14,000.
14,508. Yeah. And with our fixed on-site parking and then various credits for EV spaces, in each of those instances, we have demonstrated, and again, this is a very broad perspective, but we have demonstrated, I believe, that sufficient parking can be provided. And again, that was done to give you a sense that it can fit, it's appropriate where the project is located, and that the infrastructure, not only on the city roadway network, but on the internal network and the parking, certainly is appropriate for the site. And so with that, we concluded that with obvious traffic improvements, we can't live with it the way it is, but with those traffic improvements, considering other options vis-a-vis Pulaski, that certainly this is a viable project as this GDP contemplates. We understand every single phase that comes before you would require the detailed traffic study. This isn't a one and done. Each time a building comes in, this board would appropriately review the granular details of the proposal, including a look at traffic conditions at the time. And as any applicant is, we're certainly committed to adhere to that practice, so that you recognize that each time it's a fresh look with contemporary traffic data. What we can't anticipate 20 years from now is things like driverless cars and technology that makes that infrastructure and driving more efficient than it is today. And obviously those types of techniques, we can't just keep building things. We can't just widen highways. So we have to make better use of the highways and roads that we have. Technology allows us to do that. Things 20 years ago that didn't exist, we all take it for granted, but variable cruise control in our cars and emergency braking and 360-degree perspectives, all of those are one small little technique, but even the traffic signal systems have become more sophisticated and more demand responsive. Each one of those brings another element of improved efficiency to a system. So it's not just more blacktop. A lot of times it's technology that will continue to improve that. And that's all I have, commissioners, in the way of direct presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Dean, I have a question. I know there was testimony previously, discussion about East 40th Street.
Yes.
In terms of the timing. And as someone well-versed in traffic as you are, can you speak a bit about whether an area such as this can go on without that East 40th Street connection for, let's say, 20 more years? As a resident of Bayonne, the traffic, you're describing traffic at different points, but I think all of us can speak to the level of traffic that we see at various times in that area. And to me, it just seems kind of silly that we're sitting on this East 40th Street as a connector, not being used potentially for a number of years. So can you just talk about how that piece might impact traffic improvements if East 40th Street were to be built into the phases sooner rather than later?
And I assume, and now I lost my pointer.
It would be to the north of the
Correct.
top of that.
East 40th is part of another approval, is that correct? It's not part of this general development plan?
It was part of another approval, but your client does have property that fronts on East 40th Street.
To answer the chair's question, whether it's this applicant who builds it or I believe it's KRE that has the approvals on the northern section, it needs to be built. Anything I've done in this study assumes that we called it Veterans, the east end of East 40th, whichever, that needs to be built. And candidly, it's whoever gets there first.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's this applicant with a cost sharing with KRE, that would be done. The commitment to provide that infrastructure, to me, it was assumed that there was no skirting it. We could not provide, for example, the proposed north-south street to stub at the right-of-way for East 40th. That just isn't workable. So, and I apologize, where we've focused is on what I consider the nodes, the intersections,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we get into, do we need 2 lanes, double left turn lanes, slip ramps, right turn lanes? We've evaluated a number of concepts. One of them I included in our study at East 40th and chosen few that shows a traditional intersection with a light and the number of lanes required. Through consultation with Costco, We were aware in the drafting of that concept, the presence of their, and I'm not sure what the restriction, if there is one on that driveway at the very northern end is. It's signed for delivery trucks only, but it does carry a fair amount of traffic. So that's, we know it sits right on top of the intersection. And so a traditional light will affect them. And so we've explored other things like a roundabout, modern terms. That certainly works as well, and candidly, I like them because no one has to stop. People move slowly, which means they're moving safely, and lights have inherent, oh, I thought I had a green light, I thought I had a red light, and accidents happen. At roundabouts, everyone makes a right turn. So it's a very uniform, slow, and managed traffic flow. That is one of those elements. We're not here to decide on any specific scheme, but it is to give you but two options to how that intersection can function. But to answer your question, we whether it's KRE or I'll say this applicant or the other applicant, again, we have the two other parcels that you're going to hear next, all are shareholders in this process. And so I don't have a right answer until staff and collectively we assess what makes the most sense.
Okay,
but also-
you would agree that that is a needed, a needed street?
100%,
Okay.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
I think that's an issue that when we come in for the first site plan and for subsequent site plans, we'll have to do an analysis, and if at that time it hasn't been built and it needs to be, that would be part of the analysis at that point in time.
Okay.
At this point, I don't know that we're at a point where we can predict exactly when it would have to be built, but again, we're going to have to come back to the board. And as with all traffic improvements, when we come back to the board will look at where everything is traffic-wise, what needs to be done, and the applicant will be assessed a pro rata share of contribution towards whatever is required.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tripp.
Mr. Tripp, you do understand, though, that in all likelihood, your application won't be for the parcel that fronts on 40th Street as the first parcel that you come in on, but you would be...
It will not be.
But you would be prepared to deal with that issue for us if you came in with another parcel?
That's correct. We would be prepared to deal with East 40th and all of the other items that Mr. Dean dealt with on a site plan by site plan basis. Obviously, he'll be preparing studies at each instance to determine what's been done, what needs to be done, and those are issues that will have to be addressed.
What I'm indicating to you is that we're going to be looking for something like that from the very beginning.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will leave you with one other observation from other projects throughout New Jersey. I've been doing this long enough. One of the ways that a community can best manage traffic, and it's currently a buzzword in urban planning, is for years, most planning agencies have required or implemented minimum parking standards, where in this instance you want, and the redevelopment plan, I believe, requires a minimum of 1.1 spaces per unit. The paradox to, I'll say, requiring minimum parking standards is it means you can accommodate cars. And one of the ways to control traffic is to implement those as maximum parking standards and consider an option of reduced parking. Why? Reduced parking means fewer cars, plain and simple. And that is one technique you have in terms of overall planning to consider that. And it has been done successfully in other locations, particularly where you have immediate access to mass transit, light rail, ferry, et cetera. So while this proposal currently complies, in my opinion, with those standards, if traffic continues to be an issue, and listen, I've been doing this long enough, I've got a career focusing on traffic, but less parking means less traffic, and that in and of itself is a tool that you control and can implement. What it does is it effectively pushes the burden of marketing to the applicant, in that if they don't need the parking and residents want to move to a community because they don't need a car. And car leases are $700-800 a month, and sometimes they cost to park and insure. Owning a car in New Jersey is very expensive. And many people want to live in certain communities where, because of the amenities, commercial, medical office, access to food, all that are walkable, one doesn't need a car anymore. And that is something for you to consider. I don't offer it as a specific technique at this point, but as this process continues to evolve, I think it is a very effective planning tool that should be considered. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any commissioners have some additional questions?
Yes, I do,
Sure,
Madam
Commissioner
Chair.
Bowes?
It's a huge project, definitely. As it is right now, I am not expert on traffic, I am no engineer or anything like that. However, and I don't plan to be. However, right now, as it is today, on 440, when coming southbound, it's a two-way, two sides, right? Two lane. During rush hours, you can see that become just one lane because people coming southbound, they turn on going to Costco,
On Gold, yeah.
or Goldsboro, or whatever. And it's amazing because the amount of traffic, because the traffic lights hold everybody. So I see 2 traffic already accident in that particular section there. Imagine this amount of 10,000 units during rush hours hitting that road or the chosen few way. You have no space to road widening because the Bay 151 won't allow you to go to wide the street to accommodate traffic. That's beside the trailers, the commercial trailers that I see here, going 440. It's amazing. So it's kind of concerned me a lot with the traffic, with the huge amount of this application, this project. It's beautiful. You are very eloquent. You explain, but we would like to see it in site plan to see how we're going to improve or accommodate the traffic here in the city of Bayonne.
And safety is my number one concern. That is my charge as a civil engineer and a traffic engineer in particular. We have a lot of bad drivers. No way to disguise it. People don't pay attention the way they should. It has nothing to do with planning and zoning. It's just human nature. We try to compensate for that with vehicle design and awareness. We've got signs, we have lights. That's where technology and having people pay greater attention and adhere to that. But I fear whenever you have traffic signals at intersections, there's always a potential. What we do is, in our design, we minimize it. We sign it, we stripe it, we provide as much advance notice to a driver as possible. And I don't have every answer, and your concern, I understand, and that's why there are left turn lanes and arrows that let people safely make a turn as opposed to just waiting for a break in opposing traffic. One of the challenges, as you correctly identified, is Bay 151 is built, to a point that precludes it. More important than that is NJDOT has a master plan for every highway in the state. And what DOT has said is we can't make our highways any wider. And that blueprint dictates how wide 440 can ever be unless they change that standard. So that's why I was advocating for certain techniques that acknowledge that infrastructure and make better use of it through technology, through planning and zoning techniques, through alternate routes. Continuing up Chosen Few to Pulaski lessens the pressure at Goldsboro around Costco. So certainly at site plan, that will be addressed every single time. It has to be. We have to prove our case to you at each step of the way.
Yeah, I think the thing to understand is that this is a general development plan, so we have to come back. Nobody's getting carte blanche to go ahead. What we're doing is setting up a blueprint for the future development. When we come in each case, Mr. Dean's going to be standing here, and you're going to be questioning him on his analysis of what the incremental traffic for each phase is and what, if any, improvements are required as a result of that.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Locke?
Good evening.
I think you mentioned a couple times how like you're already very aware like this isn't the most specific it's going to get. Like, as you go move forward along, you're going to have to give more granular, more data, most importantly for our traffic studies relative to what needs to get approved in the future, which is good. And so the only question that I have is like I guess the previous permit, because I didn't see it on here, so it's possible that I missed it. But the previous access permit was for much lower density. This is regarding the Department of Transportation. So what are you guys actually doing to, I guess, stay compliant?
The challenge there is access permits are issued to either private individuals for driveways or to municipalities. And in this instance, that permit was issued to the city. So while some of us in this room can help facilitate that, it's a negotiation between DOT and the city. And certainly whether it's us, the other developers, Borai, even Costco and their efforts, it is a constant communication and process with DOT, and we will be part of it. But anybody who develops on the peninsula, even under the former GDP or current GDP, still is subject to those conditions. But we've had initial discussions with staff to the extent we can. But candidly, I couldn't, on behalf of my client, apply for that permit. It's a permit issued to the city. So that is affecting all development, continuing development on the peninsula, not just this. But it is, you've probably heard, quote unquote, outside agency. It's like, oh, we need a DEP permit. All right, we go to DEP. So in this instance, a DOT permit, if it's needed, would involve that evaluation with DOT. And we're part of it. We'll certainly offer our services, or I'll have to ask my client, but I mean, we would be committed to working with staff to advance that as needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Real quick, Mr. Tripp, I appreciate the statement that you made in terms of this is the beginning stages, and you can understand the concern that we get as a board approving these developments. And you're not the only one. There's a lot of development that's going to take place down there. But with the developing of Costco and the Starbucks and all that area in Goldsboro, it has been a problem. And that's the questions that we keep getting. So when developers come in and we're approving this, the concern is all the traffic that's going to be down there. We've had several accidents, and so that's the reason why we keep addressing it. But I appreciate it. This is only beginning stages, and we need at each stage to understand and have people come and say we're going to reassure the residents and the drivers that it's going to be safe down there. So that's the proposal.
Understood.
I appreciate
Understood, and I could not agree with you more. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Swell?
I'd like to make a comment
Sure.
related to Mr. Booker's question. So the general development plan does have an effect, because what it does is it sets the allowed amount of density that you can have in a particular area. If you have a site plan that comes in and there are improvements that you decide need to be done and are proposed by the applicant for an intersection, they only pay a pro rata share if it's related to improvements that are also generated by other development on the peninsula. So say you have to put a traffic signal in. That traffic signal costs $750,000 or $1 million to put in. Their share of it's $500,000. Where's the other $500,000 come from? So you can't deny that application based on that at the site plan stage, because you've already granted the rights at this stage for a development of 11,000 and some housing units, 500,000 square feet of commercial space. So this does have an effect. So you just should be aware of that is in fact, this process conveys substantial rights to to this applicant. Okay?
Thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Reichel, Ms. Mack?
All right, so let me first talk about, we had a couple conversations about East 40th Street Extension. I think that what the applicant's saying, and we have consensus here, is that, yeah, there's an obligation from another redeveloper, but what happens if that doesn't get built and these guys come in first? You know, just like we're allowing the applicant to adjust the phasing over time, we're not sort of taking this phasing plan and saying, this is it forever. We have that same latitude. So if we say, you know what, you got to bring in East 40th Street now rather than later, that's within our purview at the planning board timeframe. The next item is just administrative, which is the submitted plan has a parking scheme and a number of parking spaces, and it, as we heard from Mr. Dean, it relies on some shared parking. I just want to put on the record that that shared parking calculation is at the board's discretion, subject to the redevelopment plan criteria, and it'll be made at the time of application. And all I'm saying is that we're not agreeing to the parking count that's on the plan at this time. You have that latitude to review it based on the information that's presented for each development at the time it's submitted. Okay?
We agree with that.
The last one I'm going to say, because I think this is our last witness, is, you know, the criteria, and I had to consider this in writing my letter, right? The criteria is very specific for the GDP. Is there a reasonable likelihood that the proposed development will not cause an unreasonable impact on the community, right? So my answer to that, and you saw it in my letter, is, yeah, that's true. And that's true, and here's the big caveat, provided everybody's willing to make the investments in infrastructure that are necessary. We don't know what those are right now. This is 20 years. 10 years from now, we may decide, you know, we got to widen 440, and everybody says we don't have the money for that. Or it may be, we got to build a bigger ferry terminal, all things that we can do. We'll decide those things 10 years from now, but in my professional opinion, provided everybody's willing to make the investment, and that can include developers, other developers, the state of New Jersey, if we're all behind making the investment to make this work, there's a reasonable likelihood that it will not cause an unreasonable impact on the community.
Thank you, Mr. Reichel. Okay. Sure. You're welcome.
I kept jumping ahead of Andy, so I figured it was his turn. I guess most of my comments are to the board. Some of them may be Dean. Haven't really met. I'm Suzanne Mack. I'm the city planner. I'm also a fellow in the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I also am the federal responsible in charge for the city of Bayonne, which means I handle all the DOT projects in terms of construction and implementation and the highway access permits. So I was very pleased to hear this evening that you do intend to comply and be part of the group, because as Mr. Dean said, the highway access permits and the DOT permits and the New Jersey transit permits are with the city, not with the individual owners. There are a number of improvements on the base. Mr. Reichel has probably told you about most of them. We're building a ferry terminal. That ferry terminal will have basically one boat that will go to New York. We have one slip in New York committed to us, and the capacity of that boat is basically 400 capacity. So that over time, of course, that would increase. Right now, I think some of the projects that are building closer to the ferry terminal hope that they get all of that. But as we said, Harborside did not happen overnight. Pier 13 in Hoboken did not happen overnight. I just wanted to let the board know that, just as Andy says and Brian's comments, everything can be done in time as long as everybody pulls together and is committed to it. For now, though, and Councilman Booker would tell you, the council has charged us many times with trying to settle this or improve the traffic conditions at Moppe. We have memos from Lieutenant Conti, who is our our traffic expert that indicate that unfortunately, with the development of the current traffic, which is not your traffic, it's everybody's traffic out there, it's now become the highest accident location in the city. I'm also in charge of the Vision Zero with the county, and so we're really looking at trying to take care and implement traffic improvements now for the safety of the people. Every time we come up with a project here, the public comes out and asks us about that. So I'm concurring that everything can be done in time, but I think we have to put a few things on the record. Costco is here. Costco has been a good partner with the city to try to get a new entrance on 440 and has been working with the city very cooperatively to get that improvement out on Goldsboro, and I think they're going to speak to it a little bit now too. So traffic capacity, widening possibly of the roads at Moppe, traffic signalization. Another point that gets brought up here about capacity on the light rail. The mayor of Bayonne has requested in writing and has had an active conversation for over 2 years now with New Jersey Transit, because the Hudson Bergen Light Rail, now 20 years old in Bayonne, is at capacity at 45th Street and all the other stations except 34th Street. So New Jersey Transit is actually doing a system-wide study of how they can improve capacity along the line with an emphasis on Bayonne. So, as we move forward, I believe that we are also just about, Transit's just about to put out the transit development project at the 34th Street station, which I know many people here are interested in. And we're also building, an overpass with New Jersey DOT to the light rail in a hopes also to improve the mode split, because when people will be able to safely travel from Moppe over to the light rail, we're hoping that that will increase the mode split and that there will be less emphasis on cars. So I think we all know the pieces of the puzzle that we have to work on for the next 20 years, or you'll be working on for the next 20 years. But I also think it's good to acknowledge that there's been about 25 years of work in it. We're excited to see the GDP. And as you know, everything changes. I mean, we'll have drones dropping all the packages. That's Mr. Alessi's idea, by the way. He has it in he tried to put it in his redevelopment plan. But he's not wrong. Things change over time. But we are part of a New Jersey DOT highway access permit. Right now, we do not have capacity for all of the development that's on the base. We're almost there, and I hope that your client and the other client for the GDP go in for the amendment that we started 2 years ago, which will at least bring us up to speed so that, as Andy says, the future will be the future, and our next, after this permit that we're trying to get, and Costco's permit, which we're trying to get, we will definitely work towards getting all of you your future permits over time, and you'll come back to the planning board and their professionals in doing that. So I look forward to actually working with you on the capacity and on the highway access permit for your client who's represented here tonight.
Likewise, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mack.
We'll be looking for the Zeppelin mast on the 50-story tower. Yeah.
At this point, excuse me, at this point, are there any members of the public that have any questions for Mr. Dean? Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean. No questions. You're welcome. And I believe we have an additional witness.
We do. Before I introduce Mr. McDonough, there had been a discussion earlier when we were talking about the open space back at the beginning of the meeting, and there was some question about leaving the lot 1.14 park to the middle of the phases. And my client, we had an opportunity to discuss it briefly, and we certainly, as a condition of any board action, would be willing to move that up further as the board may request. We would work with your consultants and move that up to an earlier phase. So that's something we would certainly be willing to do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tripp. Appreciate that. Okay, Mr. McDonough, I think he's waiting to get sworn in.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and we accept Mr. McDonough as an expert witness. He's a frequent flyer here.
Thank you.
Via Uber Elevate, which will be coming down the road.
I think a drone dropped him off, yes.
Mr. McDonough, just briefly describe what you were asked to do for this evening.
My charge is pretty simple here, is to compare how this GDP amendment aligns with the recently amended RDP, or redevelopment plan. So what I was going to do was
And the statutory criteria
I was going to
for
walk you through the
redevelopment.
statutory criteria that this board should consider as it goes through the analysis of the amended GDP before you. Take it away, Steve.
Yeah, you can hit the criteria, talk about the redevelopment plan and the criteria for general development plan approvals.
Sure. Pretty straightforward. There are 5 points, 5 criteria that the board needs to consider with this GDP amendment. They're all listed under NJSA 40:55D-45 in the MLUL. Again, 5 parts. We'll take you through one by one. Number 1, identify any departures from zoning regulations otherwise applicable. You've heard it over and over this evening. There are no departures from the amended RDP, or redevelopment plan, so this is not applicable. Essentially, what we're looking to do here this evening is align the GDP with the redevelopment plan, or the RDP. We're sitting on an approved GDP, and we're also sitting on an approved redevelopment plan that has been amended. These amendments will bring this project or this site up to align with the redevelopment plan. So that's part number 1. Part number 2, address the adequacy of the proposal for maintenance and conservation of open space. You heard it through Mr. Higgins' testimony at the outset, and you saw the extensive green space and open space that is contemplated. I'll say the aggressive phasing plan of that open space as well. The proposal includes publicly accessible open space, including that beautiful greenway at the centerpiece of the project that all the units will frame. Testimony has addressed the details and maintenance of the conservation of the open space areas, so the board can move favorably on that criteria as well. Number 3, address the adequacy of the physical design for public services, control over vehicular and pedestrian traffic, and amenities of light and air, recreation and visual enjoyment. You have testimony through all 3 witnesses before me. Again, that visuals as well that have addressed connectivity, circulation, public services, and the adequacy of light and air. Number 4, confirm that the proposed plan development will not have an unreasonably adverse impact upon the area in which it is proposed to be established. This, as we know, is a distinct location. Montby, the 400 acres that jet out into Hudson Bay, the most significant landmass in the bay, is a special place. This is a worthy gateway of that special place, and you've heard the phrase world-class. That's exactly what this is going to be for this special place. So importantly, we've heard it through the policy statements that led to the amendment for the redevelopment plan. This site is at a distinct location that has excellent carrying capacity to accommodate a project and a long-term build-out of this scale. We're at a multimodal transit hub with access to rail, with water, the future ferry services, and bus transportation. And you have extensive testimony and a report with respect to traffic. Lastly, testimony has addressed the adequacy of utility infrastructure to serve the site, and that came through Eric's testimony as we went through the engineering. Last criteria, address the adequacy of the terms and conditions to protect the interests of the public, the residents, the occupants, and the owner as this project is developed over a period of years. Again, we've seen the base transform from a place that was designed and intended to protect Americans as a place now that will house its citizens. And this project is designed such that each phase will be self-sufficient and build upon the prior as it goes. And additionally, not only from a physical planning standpoint will there be a nice overall integration here, but from a fiscal standpoint as well, and we've provided a fiscal impact in that regard. this project will create a significant tax rateable for the city and the community as well. In conclusion, the statutory criteria under subsection 45 in the land use law are met here for this very, very special project. This is the first step in what will be many steps, and the applicant is essentially looking for an endorsement. We know the Bayonne Master Plan has over 60 references to Motby as a special place within the community and a targeted growth zone. As I said, this project will create a world-class gateway to your award-winning peninsula and the 400 acres that are behind it. The GDP amendments will align the RDP amendments, and the statutory criteria are met. With that, I would offer that approval of this amended GDP is certainly warranted. That's all I have on direct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonough. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. McDonough? Sure, Commissioner Villado?
I heard before, and I just want to, if you could clarify, we had mentioned a school that there would be part for school. With almost 1,200 new units coming, our school in that area really cannot handle that many children more. Because even if you say it's 300, right, children more, that is almost a school building, right? So would this plan also include, because I had heard something before
Well,
that
we
was spoken
had
about
been asked to look
incorporating the
at,
school.
yeah, in both of your professionals' reports, to look at the feasibility. I mean, obviously, at this point, nobody really knows what's going to be required, how it's going to be done, but the question was whether there was sufficient space within the 500,000 square feet of non-residential to accommodate a school. And I think Mr. Higgins testified that there clearly was, that you could do a two-story school in several of the proposed buildings. So there would be room to accommodate it. If that's a direction that the city and the Board of Ed want to go in, there would be room to accommodate that. And that's basically what we can say at this point in time.
Because when we're looking at 1,200 residents, that's a lot of people moving into an area, into a school system that's already set up that we don't have land to build a new school yet. We can't find land.
And what we were...
And it's going to be a need for the residents.
And what we were asked to do was to look at feasibility and whether it would fit and there'd be an area for a school if that's the direction that the city and the Board of Ed go in. And what we've concluded is that, yes, there is room. There is...
To piggyback off of that, what I heard in the testimony, I believe, said it would be 2 stories and it would be adequate. So I was just curious to piggyback off what the measurements of adequate are, only because many of our schools are not even, 2 stories. They're 3 and 4 stories. And maybe the square footage spreads out, I don't know, so if you wouldn't mind.
So I did do some research today. The New Jersey, the DOE, the Department of Education has a standard. And so and the number that was kicked around was between a 500 and 800 student school. And that would be anywhere between, depends on the ages, because they have different spatial requirements, but it was between approximately 70,000 to about 112,000 square feet. And we did have that, there's a couple locations within this general development,
General Development Plan.
that could accommodate that on 2 stories, which is also consistent with the DOE requirements.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Any other commissioners? Any other commissioners? Okay, Mr. Slaw?
I did want to point out that the population expected in this part of the GDP is over 20,000 people. Yeah, you had said 1,200, so it's...
1,200 units.
Be 12.
It's
closer to-
11,900 units?
Yeah.
So that's what I was referring to.
12,000.
12,000. Yeah,
Thousand.
just wanted to help you there. He has a low public school children population, but there will certainly be other children on the site as well. Okay, so that's actually where I was going with my questioning, had to do with the school use, and that questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slaw. Ms. Mack, Mr. Reichel? Nothing, Mr. Reichel? Ms. Mack? Okay. So at this point, are there any members of the public that have a question for Mr. McDonough regarding Mr. McDonough's testimony? Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonough. Before we move to your closing statements, we'd like to open it up to any members of the public that wish to make a statement, whether it be pro or con. Please approach the microphone. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. My name is Jennifer Mazaway. I'm a partner with the law firm of K&L Gates. I represent Costco Wholesale Corporation, who is in the audience this evening. Is also a neighbor of the applicant. Our address is 21 Goldsboro Drive, where there is currently a 154,000 square foot Costco warehouse. We heard the testimony this evening, and we appreciate the proactive nature of some of that testimony as it related in particular to traffic concerns. Costco's has obviously multiple access points, but in particular a driveway on Chosen Few, which is close to the intersection with 40th Street. And a number of the traffic improvements that were proposed or potentially proposed in Mr. Dean's report would have specific adverse impact to not only the working of that driveway, but also of generally site circulation within Costco. So we recognize this is a general development plan application. We recognize that applicant will have to come back for site-specific site plan applications and approvals, but we would appreciate for the board in its consideration of this evening and in its resolution, if it were inclined to approve the general development plan amendment, that it be a condition that the applicant work with Costco and work with the city and potentially other developers and other potential applicants within this same community to ensure that the traffic improvements that are going to be proposed won't be detrimental to Costco, but in particular would be agreeable to all those interested parties.
Thank you.
Okay. One other item to mention to the board is there's been discussion about a potential right-in, right-out from Costco onto Route 440, and it is accurate that Costco is pursuing that. However, to the extent that that is not approved by the New Jersey Department of Transportation, we would like to make sure that applicant in subsequent planning board applications takes into account the fact that that may not be an improvement that comes. And so there has to be an alternative that they're proposing that does not include that right-in, right-out of Route 440. We also, with regard to the 40th Street and Chosen Few intersection, to the extent that any potential traffic improvement that's agreed to among the parties requires right-of-way from other developers, that should also be considered during that planning process between the applicant, the developer, and the city. So we'd ask the board to consider that in its deliberations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mazawey. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have a line. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, Madam Chair,
Good evening.
Commissioners. Good evening. Michael Florendo. That's Florendo. How are you? So it's my first time to attend this kind of event here in the city.
Welcome.
But I've been living in Bayonne for the past 10 years, and I've seen the progress. It wasn't as fun as before Costco, but we have Costco now, so most of the people I know look, I would say, is excited of the weekends, they're in Costco. So anyway, I've seen the billions of dollars being discussed here. But here's the thing, here's my take on this. As a resident, and by the way, I represent the Filipino-American community. Together with our community here, we will be organizing the very first Filipino-American festival here in Bayonne this coming
Very nice.
October. So we're very excited.
Thank you.
We love to see that progress. we've noticed a huge amount of Filipino Americans moving to Bayonne for the past 4 or 5 years. In fact, you will run out of karaoke machines very soon in Costco. So having said that, we know that we want to grow our community. We want to be part of this community, and we already are. But there will be a lot of challenges along the way. So from a normal guy like me, my concern is, how will it take me to buy that $1.50 hot dog with drinks in Costco from my house, which is usually going to take me 7 to 8 minutes without traffic. But if I had to wait another 15 minutes for that $1.50 Coke and hot dog, and there's progress, then I will have to make those sacrifices. That's all. From a resident's perspective, we love to see Bayonne, go to the next level and, enjoy the fullest potential of being a resident in Bayonne by having that beautiful vision that these people have. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I think we need a second Costco.
East side, west side.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Maria Florendo. I'm actually the daughter of Mike. I just wanted to come up here also as a resident to also give my intake on this. Also, first time being part of, I would say, a meeting like this in the city. A little bit of a background, as my dad mentioned, he's lived here for quite some time. We actually originally were from Hoboken, decided to move here to Bayonne. I went to college. I actually decided to move to downtown Jersey City. I lived there for a few years, and just last year I moved back here to Bayonne. And I know that there are a lot of challenges, a lot of, I would say, things that need to be smoothened out based off of what the witnesses mentioned, some things that honestly I myself wasn't aware of. But also a little bit of a side note, I actually also live in Bay 151. So all of these things are very much relevant. It's something that I wake up to every day, I come home to every day. And, while I understand that, these, I would say, complexities absolutely need to be discussed and fine-tuned. It's something that I hope, can come to life in terms of the projects that have been brought up today. I have friends around my age that are moving from New York, from downtown Jersey City, looking for place, for more space, and a lot of them are really looking into places like Bayonne, and I do see the potential here. Every single time I talk to my friends who are looking for other living alternatives, I always mention it to them, all the development, and I do hope that this project will come to fruition. And I'm very much excited. Again, as a resident, I understand there's so many things that need to be, I would say, resolved to get to that point. But definitely something that, again, as a resident, I hope to see in the future.
Thank you very much. And I must say, having sat on this board for the amount of time that I have and watched a lot of these plans come through, it's nice to see our residents come out and share with us where they are in all of the different developments, because, more than 10 years ago, a lot of this was just conversation where we are now. So thank you for sharing that, because it's nice to hear with everything that all of our volunteers up here do, and our city, our city planners and everybody that works with us work very hard to make these things happen. So I just want to thank our residents for coming out and sharing that. It was very nice. With that said, I believe it is now, unless there is anyone else who wishes to come up and speak, I think, Mr. Tripp, you are back for your closing statements.
And I'll keep it brief, given the length of all of the testimony and the questions.
Mhm.
Basically, as I started out, this is a general development plan amendment that complies with the redevelopment plan as amended. There are, as the citizens just mentioned, as the residents just mentioned, there are complexities. We've addressed them really in the best manner possible, given the overall nature of a general development plan. We received substantial reports from your professionals totaling in excess of 30 pages, and we spent a good deal of time working with them on their comments to satisfy ourselves that we would be able to address those comments. And we're certainly willing to work with your professionals to satisfactorily address the comments in their reports. I mean, there's some discussion we had back and forth, but we're confident that we will be able to resolve the issues and provide the information that was requested as a condition of any board approval.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners,
I have a question for
Sure.
Mr. Tripp. Mr. Tripp, you've seen the professionals' reports as they relate to the companion application here, meaning the Mahalaxmi.
Correct.
We did not want to approve this until that was approved. Would you accept the condition that your approval is only valid after the Mahalaxmi application is approved?
Well, we would certainly, at this point, be willing to accept a condition that, our approval would be conditioned on the board acting on that application. And if that doesn't occur for whatever reason, we'd have to come back and discuss whatever other additional terms and conditions are required.
Okay,
But we would understand that it would be on that basis.
okay.
okay.
Does the board understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Loud and clear. Thank you. Okay, commissioners, any comments regarding this application before we move to a vote? Okay. I know there was a lot of conversation about the 40th Street. I know we heard from Mr. Slaw, we heard from Mr. Reichel and Ms. Mack, and, that this is kind of the outline. We know it is general, but we know it is the outline. So I personally do feel, I know that there are other plans involved in the 40th Street piece, but I do think personally that this is an important component that needs to be addressed. Not sure how we would work that in. Perhaps, Mr. Campusano, you can assist with the
Yeah,
legal part?
that'll become part of when they come forward with a site plan application.
Okay. So we're not stipulating any time frame on that. We're just saying that they're coming back with it. So it could be phase 1, it could be phase 7.
As soon as they come back,
Okay,
we'll
so-
be talking to them about that.
Perfect.
We've already approved something on the 40th Street side with the Mahalaxmi.
Okay.
So this would be the completion of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Sure. Okay.
All right, real quick, thank you, Mr. Tripp, and I would just like to extend my appreciation for all the professionals in the city here and also the professionals that do the presentations for the projects. I just want to echo what my colleague here said in regards, we are not professionals, and we rely on you for that information to help us make informative decisions what's going to be best for the city. And I just want to extend my gratitude for that. And the residents just came up and spoke. I truly appreciate that. It makes me feel good that people are paying attention. And again, the decisions that we have to make are pretty big decisions. So to all the professionals here, I appreciate that because I am not an engineer. I am not a planner. I'm here on this commission to try to gather all that information and make the right decisions for the city of Bayonne. So I appreciate you, and I figured I would say that now as opposed to when the vote gets here, everybody's just going to say to me, make your vote. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure, Commissioner Locke. You may want to use your microphone just for our stenographer.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is necessarily like a question for one of the professionals, but I just wanted to make sure, so I understand before I vote, that if this amended GDP is approved, does it cement the density? And if so, does that mean like down the line, if there's a need for some capital improvements relative to traffic or infrastructure, that due to the increased density, that those improvements aren't solely the burden of the applicant, and that is contingent upon like other.
Mr. Locke, why don't you address that question to Mr. Slough? He's our board
Yeah, that's a very
professional.
good question.
So yeah, like who would be in that case, responsible for it? And let's say, because I remember they said earlier, like it really depends on who, gets built first. So if this gets approved and that density is there, but one of the other parties can't perform relative to those capital improvements, whose burden is that?
So if there's an improvement that is caused solely by this redeveloper, they would be responsible for that improvement wholly. But if it's a traffic improvement where their impact on that improvement is a percentage. So if there's existing traffic that's causing an issue, traffic from another project or project in general, then they would be, it's a function of the municipal land use law. It's a pro rata share of the improvements would be their burden. And there's a form, you would figure out a formula for that to work. If there were improvements that needed to be made to the, say, water supply system caused by this development, they would be responsible for that. But if it was water supply issues that were created by several projects, they would have to share in that. So there are also other discussions in the city about, for example, looking at a special improvement district, which would look at the Mockbee as a whole, but that hasn't advanced to an ordinance stage. In other words, that would be something where there would be an assessment for all the property owners and within a particular area related to improvements. But that's a more complicated process that hasn't come to fruition yet.
Okay. And that does this approval cement the density?
Yeah, it allows them to build to that density. It doesn't obligate them to.
Okay.
I just want to add a little bit to Mr. Slough's narrative there is that, I'll use water as an example. The water improvement to service the development has to be made. We can have pro rata shares of responsibility, but the building doesn't get occupied until the water shows up. So these are sort of the sausage, making the sausage and who pays for it and the rest. But that water has to get there before anyone gets in the building. You can have that assurance is that the building won't open and be occupied until the water is delivered.
Good. Any other commissioners?
So
Yes?
that can be a big incentive to perhaps do more than your pro rata share.
Okay. All right, I think we've heard from everyone, and we are ready for a motion and a vote.
Condition
With the
that I
condition,
outlined.
Yes. With the condition that Mr. Campusano outlined. So I will make a motion to approve with the condition.
I'll second.
And on the vote, please.
Yes, on the vote. Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke.
Aye.
Commissioner Quintella. Application has been approved, subject to the condition.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We're going to take a brief break. Okay, I think we are ready to go.
We are.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Chairperson Fiamonte.
I am here.
Vice Chair Velardo. Here. Commissioner Veloz.
Here.
Commissioner Booker.
Here.
Commissioner Locke.
Here.
Commissioner Quintella. Here. We have a quorum.
Okay, we are ready to go. Mr. Pepe?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Donald Pepe from Scarinci Hollenbeck on behalf of Mahalakshmi Bayonne Urban Renewal. You've heard an extensive presentation about the other half of this general development plan. Originally, it was the whole 26 acres was subject to one plan. For various reasons, the decision was made to separate them. I have two witnesses tonight. The snow is falling down. I'm going to try and make this as quickly as I possibly can. A couple of housekeeping issues. With respect to the park, there is a condition out there from one of the prior approvals that before another site plan approval can be issued, that park has to be brought online. That has to be phase 4. This applicant has already petitioned the city to acquire the park, and we are preparing site plan approvals for that park for this spring. So that park will be brought online quite quickly. This applicant has also agreed as part of the approval for lot 1.15, New York View, to construct 40th Street. We have a footing and foundation permit for that building, and we are in the process of seeking construction financing. So every indication is that 40th Street will be constructed by this applicant with a cost-sharing provision so that anybody else who comes on later on would have to participate in the costs of that. And if we don't go first, it is a great idea that the next person who goes would also have that obligation with a cost sharing from the other people who will benefit from that road. Having said that, I'm going to introduce my
Before you do that, Mr. Pepe, we got ahead of ourselves. We didn't actually notify
introduce
what this application is about. This is item number 9 on the agenda, P-23-017, Mahalakshmi Bayonne Urban Renewal LLC. Site is 1 Flagship Street, Block 751, lots 1.11, 1.14, 1.15, 1.04. Applicant is seeking an amendment to the GDP for his blocks and lots listed above.
And
Now, Mr. Pepe.
Thank you, Mr. Campusano. And I would submit that we also provided public notice for this application, provided proof of service, so the board does have jurisdiction. Ahmed? Ahmed, would you share your credentials quickly?
Yes. I do. Sure. Ahmed Imara, E-M-A-R-A.
Okay. Mr. Amar has appeared before us numerous times. We'll accept him as an expert witness.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You're welcome, Mr. Amar.
If you're able to open the plans, I'll give you the name of it right now.
I realize I can't see up close or far away.
I have no idea. I can't see it with or without anything.
A11 updated. A11. Is that it? So I'd ask you, just take the board through what we're proposing.
Sure, yes. We are looking at the updated GDP for lots 1.15, 1.11, 1.14, 1.04. And if you could keep going to the... And these are the lots being presented today. I want to mention that lot 1.04 has an existing building on it, which is Waterview 2, with the surface parking, and this will be part of my testimony in the next few seconds. If we can keep going. As part of this, I'd like to just get on the record the number of units being proposed. Residential units is 4,900 with 218 hotel bedrooms. There's also a total of 5,380 parking spaces. The open space requirement is being met at 48,615 square feet, which is 15% of the area, which is about 8.36 acres. And I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to keep this short.
Going quickly, the
Yes.
parking count that you just recited, we are not taking advantage of any shared parking calculations or any EV credits, correct?
We are not. The parking count I just instated is 1.1, is to meet the 1.1 requirement.
Mr. Pepe, please use the microphone so we can all hear you.
Apologies.
The GDP shows 7 phases. Each phase is we'll go through it right now. Each phase is basically colored and numbered. The first phase, which is what's on the screen right now, is already an approved project that Mr. Pepe mentioned in the beginning. This is the New York View on 1.15, 26 stories, 281 residential units. Thank you, Alicia. Phase 2 would be Building B, which is, this would be the start of the, taking advantage of the updated redevelopment plan at 50 stories and the park on 1.14. I forgot to mention this, but we don't have to go back. As part of the phase 1, you'll see also that 40th Street was part of the approval. So with the construction of New York View, 40th Street has to be completed. This is phase 3, which would be what we're calling Building D. It's also at 50 stories. And we can keep going, Alicia.
Mr. Barr, we have all of our parking and structured parking within the development.
Yes, and I was going to just mention that. And this is the last phase for 1.15, and at this point, all the parking requirement would have been met in a 5-story parking deck between phases 1 and phases 4, and that's the area in the middle there. Thank you. This phase is considering the taking over the, I know this is a question that came up in the plan, taking over the surface parking for 1.04 and considering a high-rise building which would house several floors of parking deck for parking that would accommodate both first phase on that lot and the second phase, the 2 buildings on that lot.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And this would be phase 6, and this is the first half of lot 1.14 with structured parking, which is the green area there, and that parking would basically accommodate both buildings, which is the next phase and the final phase, phase 7. You can go.
Just a correction, it's 1.11.
I'm sorry, did it? Okay, yes, 1.11. And we can go to the next sheet now. This shows all 7 phases together. I'm just going to mention again, the top left corner, phase 1 shows 40th Street as part of that phase, the completion of that before the CO as required per the site plan approval for that building. And the last phase would be the second building on 1.11. Of course, this is something that we, as mentioned with the prior application, this is how we're forecasting it, but changes in phases or the buildings could happen as part of this part of the project. Each phase we're looking at as about 36 months construction schedule, and that's also something that came up in Mr. Slaw's report. We are not saying that this would happen sequentially, so it's not a total of 21 years. We're saying this would happen, the vesting would happen within 20 years. It could happen, phase 1, 2 and 3, or 2 and 6 could happen at the same time, potentially. But this is something that we just wanted to get on the record as well. And with that, I think I've concluded. I wanted to just keep it very short. Any
So
questions?
just very quickly, with respect to density, with respect to height, with respect to parking count, with respect to open space, we're fully compliant with the redevelopment plan of Park Station 2.
Yes, every site plan application would comply with the RDP, correct.
Great. I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. O'Meara? Bless you. Any questions? Okay. I'll move down the end. Mr. Slaw?
Do you know what the residential density is in the project?
4,900?
I meant the density. So there's acreage. Is there
Units per acre.
units per acre, or?
I can bring that up, sure.
While he's doing that math calculation, for the record, we heard the prior testimony from the prior applicant. We will have to be coming back before this board for subsequent, more detailed site plan applications for each subsequent phase of this project. And to the extent that we are triggering the need for any upgrades in any infrastructure, from roads to water to sewers, we would be, and we agree that we are responsible for our proportionate share of those improvements.
And the number is approximately 600 units per acre.
So that would be similar to the density also proposed for the other sections of the block.
Correct, yes.
And do you know what the non-residential floor area ratio is?
That's not something you're going to do quickly.
No, that's not something I have right now.
Be able to supply it as a condition of?
Absolutely, yes.
Of a resolution compliance?
Yes.
Absolutely. We would provide revised plans that would
Yes.
have that information.
With the with the GDP application as shown, indicates that lot 1.04 retains its same dimensions, but which means that lot 1.11 1.16 owned by the municipality would still lack what, for the lack of a better term, adequate right-of-way. Is that still the intention with this GDP?
That is not the intention. That was prior to the conversations we've had about the street being put there, so that the extent of the GDP would be updated with the revised GDP to show the street area and the smaller lot size.
It would be an area where you would intend to subdivide and dedicate that land or transfer that land to the municipality.
Yes, to the municipality, correct, yes.
Yeah. So that would, in the land use plan
Correct.
of the GDP, you would indicate that land to be municipally owned.
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slaw. Mr. Reichel?
Mr. Slaw took my question there. I think,
Sorry, Andy.
yeah, and with respect to the utilities and the off-site infrastructure, council advised that they're open to that and understand that it'll happen at each planning board application. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mack, anything?
Phase it would go into, but I just want to commend the applicant, the architect, the traffic engineer for him, and the attorney have been very helpful and very responsive, and I just wanted to acknowledge that on the record.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, are there any members of the public that have a question for Mr. Mara regarding his testimony? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Mara, thank you. Okay, Mr. Pepe, I believe.
I have one more witness
Okay,
from Stonefield Engineering, Andrew Vischio. There you go.
I think we'll have him spell it, just to make sure.
That's V as in Victor, I, S as in Sam, C-H-I-O.
Okay, and, God, I'm sorry.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and how do you say that? I just want to make sure.
Vischio.
Vischio, okay. Good
Thank
evening, Mr. Vischio.
Good evening.
Andrew, just share your credentials with the board.
Absolutely. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My license is active and in good standing. I've practiced for approximately 14 years. Haven't been before this board, but have been accepted by numerous boards throughout the state.
Okay, we'll accept Mr. Vischio as an expert witness, and welcome to Bayonne.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So you've reviewed the traffic study that was prepared in conjunction with the prior application?
That is correct, and I've also reviewed the general development plan set that Ahmed just reviewed.
And your findings, your conclusions?
Sure, and I'll also acknowledge that we are in receipt of the engineering review letter prepared by Waterman LLC dated February 6th, 2025 for the subject application. We concur with the engineering review letter in that the traffic impact analysis prepared by Dolan and Dean provides a generally reasonable estimation of future conditions, but should be used as an advisory document. We take no exception to the review letter's guidance that the obligations of the redevelopers to construct and or pay for their fair share of necessary traffic improvements be based on a robust traffic study prepared at the time of each project's site plan application. As I mentioned, we intend to use the Dolan and Dean report as an advisory document and commit to preparing that site-specific traffic study for each application in accordance with city guidelines as each property advances to site plan application.
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
I would have to defer to council, but I know that phase one would take approximately 36 months. And then beyond that, I think is, somewhat speculative, but that was all detailed in the EG Architects phasing plan set. The durations are on those plans.
Yeah, we're calling for a 20-year duration. We're hoping it'll be much quicker than that. 20 years is what's allowed under the GDP approval. and that's just to vest our rights with respect to the property. If we take on two projects, two phases at the same time, that's obviously going to cut it down, something we'd certainly love to do.
Thank you. Any other commissioners, questions? Okay, Mr. Slaw?
Yeah, so the question is, there's additional information that I would seek to have submitted, and some of that's from the architect, but also some of it's a bit of it's engineering. Then would you agree as a condition of approval to submit that information for resolution compliance purposes?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to caveat to that, I'd like to work with planning staff to decide what it is and is not most appropriate. A lot of it was submitted with the original GDP application, and it's not, in my opinion, necessarily relevant to the amended application, but to the extent it is, gladly.
Understood.
Any other questions, Mr. Slaw?
That's all I have of this applicant, professional. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reichel?
Just maybe these are more comments. Haven't heard the testimony or public comment from the last application, which is I think is applicable to this one as well, is that the traffic study we're working off of came up with some solutions potentially to solve future traffic problems. We're not agreeing to any of those right now. We're going to decide at each planning board hearing what the improvement is. So to the extent that there was something proposed in that plan that affected Costco, they think in a negative way, we're not agreeing to that today. So I just wanted to make that clear. And then I'll just affirm what I said last time for the application. My overall opinion on this, which I said in my letter, is that it's reasonable. It's a reasonable conclusion that this project will not cause an unreasonable impact to the community. That's the threshold. That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mack?
Yes, just to go to that, I wanted to comment on the traffic. Stoneville Engineering reviewed the original report that Mr. Reichel did from the prior applicant, and we did not agree with all the conclusions in the prior report, but Stoneville had a very reasonable approach, of what we can move forward with, because as everybody has said here tonight, this is going to be a very long-term project, and as long as we all cooperate, we know it'll be a good outcome for the city of Bayonne.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, are there any members of the public that have questions for Mr. Vicchio? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Vicchio. Are there any members of the public that wish to come forward and make a statement? Oh. Good evening.
Gentlemen, my name is William Gaviria. My name is William Gaviria, Gaviria. I'm a resident, Gavs Victor, IRIA.
Okay, and you can, if you wouldn't mind just tilting the microphone up so that we can hear you better. Thank you.
First of all, I want to congratulate you all for all the hard work that you guys put off. I seen all the hard decisions to get all these projects approved, end up in this pretty much auditorium. Been a resident in Bayonne for about 25 years. I love the development. I love what I've seen since back when 440 used to be a two-way highway. Again, I think I support, the approval of all these projects. It will be a good thing for the city of Bayonne. I don't need as much hot dogs over in Costco as the other residents do, but love the fact that they're there as well. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening.
You're welcome.
Good evening again, Chair and
Good
board members and members of the public. Jennifer Mazaway, M-A-Z-A-W-E-Y. I'm an attorney with K&L Gates in Newark and represent Costco Wholesale Corporation, who is also a neighbor of this applicant that's before the board this evening. I would simply like to state for the record that Costco is interested in this applicant, as well as the applicant of the former application, to continue to work with the city. We appreciate Mr. Reichel's comments that the proposals within the Dolan and Dean report are not accepted as is, As I've mentioned, we believe those to be detrimental to Costco. However, want to continue to work with the developers, with their traffic teams, and with the city to make overall improvements that are going to be best for those developments as well as Costco. These developments bring residents, which are potential members or are members of Costco, so we certainly welcome them, but we want to make sure that the developments are done in a way that makes sense for both those developments as well as the existing Costco that's there. So thank you again for listening to our comments this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, any other members of the public? Okay, I think, Mr. Pepe, we are at your closing statements.
Yes, so I have no further witnesses, and I will submit on the record so that everybody can get home.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe. Commissioners, any comments for the record? Okay. All right. Thank you for keeping it concise. We appreciate that, as it is starting to snow. At this point, I will make a motion to approve.
Second?
And on the vote?
Vote. Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo. Aye. Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke. Commissioner Quintella. Application's been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Safe home, everybody.
Same to you.
We have
Get home safe, everyone.
We have a single resolution that we have to approve this evening. It is P-24-030, 26 North Avenue, Urban Renewal LLC. It's Block 297, Lot 3. The application was approved at the last meeting. Can I get a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
I'll move.
I'll second.
And on the vote, Chairperson Fiamonte.
Aye.
Vice Chair Velardo.
Aye.
Commissioner Veloz.
Aye.
Commissioner Booker.
Aye.
Commissioner Locke. Commissioner Quintella. Resolution has been approved. Motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Second.
On the vote?
And all in favor.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Have a good evening, everyone. Get home safe.